Hello, and thank you for clicking into Cuppa Americano. This is a conversation with Glen Owen, a personal trainer with 15 years of experience developing personalized exercise and diet plans for clients ranging from athletes to parents. He is the author of an upcoming book on the Drive Method to help readers develop their own plans and routines to achieve their fitness goals. Enjoy. Glenn, man, thanks a lot for hopping on. I'm excited for this. There's a lot to go on. And yeah, I was just about to tell you why I needed an extra day is I got a new camera, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to get my production set up. And I gotta
Yeah.
say, I really like what you have going on there. Like it's high
Well, I was
quality.
gonna say, if you want after the podcast, I've spent a lot of time researching this kind of stuff, all self-learned. I'm happy to go over some of the details with you and let you know the small little things that make a big difference. But like, I love talking about tech for entrepreneurship, like when people are like solopreneurs like us. So
Yeah.
that'd be something I'd love to discuss afterwards if you're interested, right? No pressure, obviously.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's see how much time we have. We might have time to even jump on it today. Like I'm sure there's some tips we could pass back and forth in terms of what we've learned so far. But definitely, like lighting is not something I ever thought I would have to learn. Lighting,
Yeah.
cameras. I'm trying to stay away from lenses, but I might
Yeah.
have to eventually.
Hey,
How long have you been doing this? How long did you start putting together your office there?
this COVID, man, COVID was rough.
COVID.
We Canada, for the American and worldwide listeners, we had like the longest lockdowns of any country in the world. We had like a total of 18 months of lockdowns.
Mhm.
And at that time, you're trying to scramble and figure stuff out. So at that point in time, my colleague, Brandon, a very bright guy, started a podcast, referred to it as it was initially the Minds on Muscle, where we were discussing exercise stuff and then turned to fitness pro mentors, because one part of what I do is also coaching and mentorship for one-on-one personal trainers, help them grow their business. And we talk about content creation, podcasting, all that kind of stuff. And
Mm.
this is kind of like where I've ended up landing myself. It's not like an extensive studio by any means. Like they're just like, one LED light here and a couple of the backlights. And I got a light here and like a digital camera in front of me and a Rode pod mic. All in all, it's probably like less than $1,000, which doesn't may sound like a lot to some people. For a home studio perspective, it's really not as expensive as it could be. And so, yeah, I've just been
Mm.
doing it for like 5 years, and this is kind of where I've landed.
All right. Well, man, I mean, yeah, it looks really good, and there's all these little things that I started about 6 months ago, and I kept hearing about how a lot of what you want to start putting out quality content, the technology is there and it's a lot cheaper than it has been before. So a grand is, if we're comparing this to 10 years ago, that would not have gotten you anywhere where you needed to get to, and if you started back
Yeah.
in COVID, that's pretty cool. Because right now I'm actually recording with an iPhone, and from the cameras that I've tested, that's actually the best I've found in terms of how quick I can get up and running. As I mentioned, I don't know anything about lenses. A friend of mine did. He kept pushing me. He was like, "You really got to get a legitimate camera." And so I started looking at legitimate cameras, and I was learning about all these things like field of vision, perspective, focal points, aperture, and I thought, man, I really don't want to learn that. I really don't want to pick that up, and eventually I might have to. I mean, that might just be a necessity. But for now, I found okay. You know what? And the iPhone has really good, computational quality. So I bought an iPhone 15 yesterday, and that's why I need an extra day to set up our recording. Is that I wanted to get a quick upgrade with the camera and see what I can get out of it. So see how
You
that
know what?
goes.
Honestly, man, the iPhone 15 camera does just fine. Like, I don't think you really necessarily need to get a digital camera for what it is that you're doing right now. I mean, if I didn't have I have a Canon M50, but my iPhone would do even a better of a job. I'm just one of those people where I don't like setting up things over and over again. Like for me to turn on the home studio, it's like two light switches and I flick a camera on and I'm good. The idea of me like plugging my phone into my computer every time, setting it up on a stand, like just for me, it's like I like that quick quality of life stuff. But if I was doing it all over again today, I would just do it the iPhone 15 and like a great mic like you have. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, I thought you had a digital camera because I noticed the difference already. I'm like, oh man, my man picked up like a new camera. And I'm like, no, he's got that iPhone 15 life. It's going, man. It's swag on. It's working for you.
Heck yeah, man. I appreciate that. So actually my phone is an iPhone 11. I've had this thing for now coming up 7 years. And I was not planning to upgrade. Maybe next year when the new one comes out, but the 15 I got specifically for the camera because I actually so here's the thing. I actually got a Sony mirrorless camera. It came in the mail and I was like, I do not know how to use this thing. And there's all these settings. I started looking at tutorials and forget all the hardware I just mentioned, like focal point, aperture, lens. There's all this stuff with the software settings that you have to kind of do manually. And I thought,
Mhm.
I just don't have the interest in this, to be quite frank. I don't have the interest, I don't have the desire, and I didn't want to put the time in it, especially when so then I started looking, hey, what about if I tried my iPhone 11 and I thought this is actually pretty decent, for what I want. So let me
Mhm.
just do an iPhone upgrade and eventually, I have that extra phone as well. So it's a two for one. It was cheaper as well. I just got a used thing yesterday. So awesome, Glenn. I'm glad you can see the difference.
Yeah, man, you look great. It's like at the end of the day, like the way things are trending right now in the world of like social media and YouTube, it's people either going to have these giant, beautiful studios like Joe Rogan or T.O. Vaughn and all that stuff, or even like I don't know if you know who Shane Gillis is and Matt McCusker. They have their own podcast, but they're
Mm,
like they were getting like top 10 podcasts, and it's like them with a couple like XLR microphones and like a crappy little camera, and like
yeah.
nobody really cares, right? It's about the content at the end of the day and the experience people have. As long as the sound is there and it's listenable, and people are going to follow you. So that's the big folly of marketing, right? I think we get that in the world of health and fitness too, which is like
Mhm.
the shiny new thing is the thing that's going to cannon you to success. When the reality is like what's the substance of the thing, not like the outside shininess, newness of the thing. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It reminds me of this fitness influencer. He's an older one. He's been around for a while, and he used to intentionally take the videos that he makes and then pass it through a few filters to make the quality worse with the whole purpose that he's trying to like prove that is the content that matters. I think the guy's name was like Frank or something, and I'm trying to find this guy now.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Well, if people are listening, they do want to be social media esque people. The way things are trending for right now is all the apps want you to use their individual editing systems, which
Mhm.
means you have to film and record on your iPhone. And if
Mm.
you look at like a lot of the top people, they just have like these old iPhone wired headphones plugged into their iPhone or their Android, and they're just talking and they edit it and they copy it, but they understand the psychology behind it that gets people um, listening and hooked into it, and they also understand just how to be um I guess relatable to whoever's listening to them, so to speak, right? So you don't need lots of fancy stuff anymore. Substance,
Yeah.
substance always, man.
I
Substance.
agree with that. Content over quality, or like production quality. Production quality, I
Yeah.
think, is secondary. It's important. I think it's more for fads. Do you listen to blues by any chance?
I don't know what you're like blues music?
Blues music, yeah.
No, no,
Okay.
I'm
The
not
reason I bring
I'm not
it,
American enough. Yeah.
well, the reason I bring it up is because there's this guy Robert Johnson who has a recording back in like the 1920s, and if you, it's now you have to search for it, but it is available. But the production quality is absolute trash. But it's also from the
Mhm.
1920s, so they're recording with
Right.
like the worst tooling available in the history of audio recording. But it's amazing, but it's like if you hear it for the first time, you're probably not gonna like it. But after you listen to it a few times and your ears kind of get over the fact that you expect a certain level of production quality, you can listen to the content, and if you like that kind of music, it's pretty remarkable stuff. But the guy I was thinking about was Robert Frank. Have you heard of this guy?
Is Robert? Yeah, Robert Frank is the guy that has very colorful commentary, I believe. Right? Like it's definitely not safe for workplace kind of content, if I'm not mistaken. It's just like
Yeah,
him, yeah, him like rapping like if you want the girls, got to do the curls, but he has far more colorful language than that.
that he does. But the reason he's the guy I was talking about that, like, I don't know if he still does this. I mean, I think he's been around for a long time, but he used to take his videos. I think he would record it on like,
Hmm.
7, 8 years ago. Uh on an iPhone or whatever his cell phone was, and then he would pass it through those filters and make it add like granularity, reduce the audio quality, and it came off worse in terms of production quality. But he kind of already made it at that point, and he was just building off of that that influencer sort of following he already had. Which I mean, it's pretty cool though. Yeah, he's able to
Yeah,
focus on that.
I think when I hear you say like worst quality, I think what that really translates into is like relatable. Like I think people
Yeah.
are now over the I mean, like things always change, but where it's very much now in the era of people want like raw realness. Now that AI, like 2025 was very much known as the year of AI slop. Like the amount of content that made it up online was like some crazy number higher, like 1.8 times higher, which might not seem like a lot, but when you consider how much media and content's already uploaded onto the internet, having like a near doubling of the amount of stuff is crazy. But the amount of attention stayed the same, right? It's not like people spend more hours
Mm,
on their phone or watching YouTube. So the amount of content that was created skyrocketed. There is the same amount of attention, and people are just like, I'm just done with all this like garbage content. And so it's
yeah.
kind of brought people to this place where it's like, we don't really care if it's the most polished thing anymore. We just want it to be like relatable and real to us. I mean, we're in this era now where the crazy amount of micro niches that are out there for
Mhm.
social media, right? I mean, like there are, like I had no idea, but there's like a Lego Masters TV show where like people just build Lego, and it's a competitive TV show. And like there's like dozens and dozens and dozens of Lego channels that get over 1 million views just because they're talking about Lego, which is something that's nowhere near my radar. Like I don't build
Mhm.
Lego. I did as a kid. And these people are driving to these micro niches, right? I mean, there's a niche
Yeah.
for everything now. There's like social media pages for white Monster energy drinks, and they all get 50,000 views every time, and people are making money off that because that is like a sub niche. There's a sub niche of people that love monsters, love exercising, and like that's what they're about. And those Instagram reels get a ton of views. It's an interesting kind of world we're in right now. Like anyone
Yeah.
can really have their own little niche carved out if they figure out what that is for them.
Yeah, I was thinking like, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, uh, pop culture was pretty much it was a single mainstream filter, like everybody knew Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Beatles, like that was it. That was the pop culture. And if you wanted something outside of that niche, you're lucky if you find any friends in your neighborhood who have like the same interest in that niche. It is pretty remarkable that this digital age can connect us to, explore these new ideas and hobbies and interests that would be hard to find connections in. So, I mean, that's awesome. Like, personally, I'm not into Legos. I liked them as a kid, but it does make me super happy that there's a group of people that can follow this their entire life and just build super more intricate models. I mean, I've definitely seen the uh the Lego build out where you could pretty much buy a Lego model for anything and everything.
Mhm.
And they get pretty complex. They get pretty complex. Actually, I was just looking at my Amazon shopping cart, and I'm probably not gonna get it, but there is a little 3D puzzle where you build like a spaceship that's towered on a booster ready to take off. And I thought, that's awesome. I'm probably not gonna buy it. I'm probably not gonna spend 4 or 5 hours putting to that together and, like, finding a place to put that. I mean, it might look nice in this, fake little studio that I have going on, but
Well, it's a real studio. It's a real studio. And it's crazy. And I never thought I'd say this, but you can go to Timu and get like fake Lego sets of almost anything these days. Like it's wild what they're producing over there across the seas, right? They take everything and rip it off and sell it for cheap as long as you wait 4 to 6 weeks.
I refuse to use Temu. I'm Amazon through and through. So,
Teach
I
the road,
actually
man.
have you tried Temu? Have you tried it?
Yeah, occasionally, like I won't get anything off of Timu that I decide is like so I'm just gonna make sure my microphone is not blowing through the earphones here. I won't get anything off of I'm not sure if it's Timu or Timu, so forgive me if it's one or the other. I won't get anything off Timu that I need to have quality. You know what I mean? Like if it's got to be a
Mm,
quality thing,
mm,
yeah. But like,
yeah,
if I'm gonna build like one Lego set, I would maybe try that off there and see how it goes. But I'm not about to buy anything that's that I need. Like I'm not about to buy a Timu camera, digital camera off there. Like I just
mm,
seems like if it my general, I don't know if this is true or not. My general thought would be like the more complex it is to make, the more they can mess it up. So I'm kind of not going to do things that are like high end digital products. But I mean, what do I
yeah.
know? I don't. I've never highly researched it.
Dude, I think that's stuff like in terms of manufacturing and putting together like assembly, all that stuff. I don't know. I think it's super interesting. Well, okay. So what's funny is I think whatever you buy on Amazon, for little knickknacks or whatever, they very well may be manufactured in China anyway. Manufactured, assembled, or carried over, which is kind of interesting. So I don't know how Temu gets their prices down so low. I've never bought from Temu. My dad did try. I think he tried a few things, but his experience has not been very good. I think it's a question of quality. I think sometimes he just gets the wrong item, and that's just it. If you get the wrong item, you're not going to get any customer support. It's just that's the end of the transaction. You tried, you failed. It's all good. Move on. Or it's they send the wrong item. So he's used it a handful of times, and I think that was enough. But I don't know, man. I've been on Amazon. I remember buying my college textbooks from Amazon and how much money that saved me. So, like,
Yeah.
college textbooks were something like $70, if not more. It could be $100 for the course. And you're thinking, this is, I'm gonna use this for a semester, and then if I trade it in, I'll get back like $5. What a ripoff! And then you've got Amazon, which gives you much better prices. So,
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Kindle person. I know it's a very for people who like to read often. You either love Kindle or you love holding paper stuff. I don't remember the last time I picked up a textbook. I have a bunch of books behind me, but I rarely crack them out. They're like you know the art pieces at this point, pretty much.
it feels like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, a lot of times I mean, I think people get excited to buy books,
Yeah.
and then they flip them over a little bit. Then like that's the end of it. Like I've read like I just if I want to read something, I just read it on Kindle or I'll read it on my desktop or something like that.
What are you
That's
what
it.
are you, what are you reading these days?
I read I try man, so the ADD can often have me just like scroll and look for things infinitely. Like I spent 10, 15 minutes just to try to find something to watch just before bed. And I
Mm,
ended up landing on Masters of the Universe movie after 10 minutes. When I go for reading, I like to find like a series that I can get behind and then just try to run through it. So right now I'm moving through, I think his name is Vince Flynn, and it's the American Assassin Mitch Rapp series. That's what I'm reading right now. But I like thrillers that move at a pretty good pace. All the Reacher books I've read. I really like the Gray Man series, which they made a movie on Netflix with Ryan Gosling. Vince Flynn. I've read all the Harry Bosch novels. I like pacey thrillers. I try reading fantasy once in a while. Like I tried reading Lord of the Rings, and they spent like an hour describing a tree, and I'm like, I don't know. It's a tree. I can whatever. Let's move on, right? I need something to keep my attention going. So thrillers for the most part, and when I get one, I'll just read 25 of them in a row, and then I'll move on to
mhm.
another series. Yeah, that's
Yeah, that's
pretty
fair.
much it.
Did you
Yeah,
did you
yeah.
go back
You
and
been
read the Odyssey with all this hoopla about the new film?
I bought it and I'm yet to read it. I love the idea. I love the idea of being one of those people where like I listen to some of the modern wisdom podcasts with Chris Williamson, and they talk about reading
Mm,
like Marcus Aurelius meditations
mm,
or books like that. I'm like I can read stuff like this. So I bought like the Tao Te Ching and the Odyssey. And I'm like, I open it, and I read a page, I'm like, whoa, this is rough
yeah,
to get through. You know what I mean? And if I don't have a lot of attention for it, I just kind of just go over it. I have a very tough time reading that. So I mean, I'd love the idea of it, but I don't know. We'll see.
yeah.
Honestly, what about you? Have you are
Med
you like it sounds like you've watched the Odyssey, and it sounds like you're reading the book, but you tell me.
so yeah, I was thinking of I actually had to read it in high school, and I used to hate literature and reading and history, all that kind of stuff. I hated it. I despised it. I was very much like a math science type of person. But we did have to read the Odyssey, and I actually love that book. I absolutely loved it. But it was like an adventure book, you know. And then that's the reason I brought it up is because it's like this old classic adventure from 3,000 years ago. It's not at the pace of Jack Reacher, of course, but it is that sort of like old mythological journey of a guy essentially going through a bit of an arc to get back what was his, or to live happily ever after. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was one of the first books that I read, and I thought, oh, reading is actually a very enjoyable pastime. And we saw in I love my teacher for doing this. She showed us the film "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" Which is,
Okay.
it's I forgot the guy's name. George Clooney stars in it, and it's taking place in, like, 19, I don't know, 30s, America, where this guy gets out of prison and he's trying to go back home to his wife, and then there's all these little adventures that take place, and it's a completely it's like a parallel take of the Odyssey. And I enjoyed it. I loved it a lot. It was a lot of fun. I haven't seen the new one yet, and what I decided what I'm gonna do is right before this Christopher Nolan film came out 2 years ago, there was this other one that came out called The Return with this actor. I can never say his name right. Ralph Fiennes or Fiennes, one or the other.
Oh, Ralph Fiennes, the
Ralph
British guy,
Fiennes.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I love that actor. Phenomenal. Like one of my favorites.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So he did The Return 2 years ago. I don't know if you saw that, but you know the actor. So
What is he? What is the return about? Is it like
same story.
similar idea? Oh, is it?
Exact same idea.
Yeah.
It's I was shocked that they made the Odyssey right after it. Like I thought, oh, this movie
Mm.
already came out. Why are people talking about this? This is 2 years old. And then I found out there's a different one with Matt Damon and Christopher Nolan, but it's literally same book, same idea. I don't know how these things like just came out right
Well,
after
it's
the other.
the Odyssey is like the original road trip movie in a sense, right? It's like one of those kind of things. Obviously, road trip movies now you think of like buddy comedies or ensemble comedies, right? Like Euro Trip. There's actually a movie called Road Trip from '90s from when I was like a teenager. Um, the
Is that
I
Tom
think what
Green?
I yeah, that's the one, right?
Yeah.
Another Canadian who dropped off the face of the planet, decided to buy a farm and just do nothing for 20 years. I know. You know what? He's a wonderful example. Tom Green's a wonderful example of like his own kind of like journey, so to speak. Like we're starting to see the layers here where started his own like cable show, very quirky comedy,
Yeah.
built it enough that he got noticed, I suppose, by Hollywood, sorry, made a handful of movies, made some money. I think he was in like one of the Charlie's Angels movies, like as a cameo, as a
Hmm.
love interest for one of the characters. Road Trip, Freddie Got Fingered is another one.
Yeah.
But then he's like, I don't really love this. I'm not really loving my life right now. Books it back to Canada, buys property outside of civilization, and just like raises animals for 10 or 20 years. And now he's back doing a handful of specials and whatnot, and back on social media, just doing what he wants to do and enjoying his life in the way that he wants to. Versus, what I see a lot of times where I feel like when I watch podcasts or movies is people trying to keep up, so to speak, right? And just trying to figure out the next thing. And I have a deep appreciation for people that are just like doing themselves, so to speak, right? Like just
Yeah.
living their life on their terms, no matter what it looks like. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree with that. I mean, it's like, look, I'm happy for Tom Green. I remember this guy. He came out of nowhere. As you said, he had that quirky comedy. Nobody would think like him, and it
Mhm.
was hilarious. And then, yeah, he fell off the face of the earth. I mean, look, if he's happy, I'm happy for him. He brought a lot of us great joy. So, do your thing, be happy. In fact, what's funny? I saw this, uh, old clip of Joe Rogan on Tom Green when Tom Green started his own show. So Tom Green was like the original podcaster, and Joe
Mhm.
Rogan was on the show saying, "Tom, this is awesome. The thing that you got set up. If you figure out a way to monetize this, this is it. This is the way forward." Lo and behold, Joe Rogan, he'll say it himself. He's like he was influenced by other people. I would call Joe Rogan as like me personally getting this thing started. Seeing Joe Rogan do it, it was a bit of
Mhm.
an influence for sure. And Joe Rogan would go back and say, "Yeah, Tom Green." I'm not the first guy to do this. Tom Green came up before me. I looked up a couple of other people because this reminded me of some other folks that did the same thing, and I'm happy for them. I wish they would come back, but do your thing,
Mhm.
PewDiePie made it
Yeah,
big on
the
YouTube.
Norwegian guy, or he's some kind of like some kind of maybe Swedish, some kind of those Nordic countries.
Yeah, same story. Made it massive. Still has a crazy YouTube channel, but he made enough money, got enough fame, and he retired to Japan, I
Yeah,
believe, growing his
yeah.
family there and just taking it quiet.
Can I
So
guess who else is on that list real quick? If we're
yeah,
talking about, is Jenna Marbles on there out of curiosity, whatever you're looking at?
I
No?
remember that name.
Jenna Marbles was also one of those huge YouTubers, and I think she realized that like she had put too much of her life onto YouTube, and it was at one of those times where people are now very used to the polarity, right? If you get big in anything, people are going to love you or hate you. Like there's
Mm,
probably just like slightly more people that really enjoy Joe Rogan than people who dislike him. I think
mm,
that seems to be like a lot of at least some of the commentary that I've seen.
yeah,
But like those people that love him keep showing up for him in droves, which is why he's had like the number one podcast for it must be over a decade, right? The most,
yeah.
most listened to views of all time. But Jenna Marbles is another one where she's like, this is just like too much. Like, I'm not loving this anymore. I'm just stopping what I'm doing. And then she just dropped off the face of the planet. I know what she's doing now, but she's another one who's just kind of like, nah, I'm good.
All right, cool. Yeah, it is. It is kind of. I mean, like, I don't think anyone could be like universally loved. Even historically, I'm sure there's a ton of Like, I mean, look
Yeah.
at Caesar, for example. He was loved and hated depending on who you ask back then. But now we look at him as someone who brought in a power to the people kind of guy. Um, but yeah, very cool. All right, so Glenn, the very beginning of our let's say reconnaissance, the way we met was because we share an interest in hitting the gym, and I
Love
think
it. Love it.
you mentioned quite a bit on what is conventional wisdom in all this, and I've been into fitness for most of my life in some form or fashion, but figuring out how weights work and how muscle building work, I've been very slow to that, which is a very, I mean, it's just I don't think there's good information out there, and to figure out how to actually
Mhm.
build muscle and why you'd want to build muscle, that's been a long journey to figure that out.
So where do you want to start there? Because I think right now where we're at and what the research says is very, very clear. It's very well established, at least how to build muscle. If we're talking about that facet of exercise and resistance training, that's abundantly clear at this point. I think where things get muddied is there are a lot of very popular people online, some very, very well versed and I think are saying the things that are well researched and coming from first principles that are logical and applicable. And there's other people where they're very popular, but they're sharing things that are like cuckoo bananas or just very much not what the science or the research says. So which direction do you want to go? And then we can take it however you want.
I think we should get into both. I think we should address what the of the types of advice that is out there that is common but is not helpful, and and then get into sort of what the research has established, because I mean, even you could even I don't know when we would say the research has been established, but even if you tell me that we've known this for like 2 decades but the general population doesn't know, I wouldn't be surprised. And like even what I know is probably not optimal, but I know it's been working for me a lot better than everything else I've tried in the last, whatever years. And let me just say, the last year of hitting the gym and focusing on resistance training, getting my macros into place has been a significant help to where I want to get to.
So okay, so this is where how I like maybe frame it for people to think about. There is like a priori knowledge and a posteriori knowledge. And these are just terms for where information comes from, like old Latin. A priori knowledge is a way of thinking about things from like first principles. Like what are things that are almost like universally true or known? What things are almost like indisputable by science? so to speak. And then posteriori knowledge is, I think I'm saying that right. Posteriori, yes. Knowledge is how we take information and look at it from different perspectives and put it together and interpret meaning from it, right? So that sounds a little convoluted, but think about a priori as being like first principles, things that are true almost universally no matter what, and posteriori, like how are we putting all this together like in different ways to get outcomes that we're looking for in the gym. So when we look at like a priori knowledge, we're talking about like almost basic physiology, like how do muscles contract, stimulus response in the body. Like it goes without saying, human beings and physiology, it's very stimulus response, right? If I do one thing, my body's going to respond in some way from that. We know that's a very, very real thing, right? So the reason I'm saying that is because we want to look at muscle building information, information that helps us build mobility, information that helps us live longer, whatever that is, from what do we know about basic physiology, right? So if we start from that place, like what's the most basic thing? We know that when it comes to building muscle, there's really one primary driver at this point, and that is going to be mechanical tension through the muscles. It was thought of maybe 20 years ago that it was part mechanical tension, part like muscle damage or cell disruption, and part buildup of metabolites, which are the byproducts of like using your muscle, right? But what we know now is that now it's pretty much just mechanical tension. These other things may help a little bit more downstream, but you've got to have the right amount of mechanical tension. So what is mechanical tension? When you lift weights, whether it's machines or dumbbells, bands, your body weight, whatever that is, your muscles are contracting and there's tension going through them, right? And the more tension, the heavier that you're lifting, the harder they have to contract, the more mechanical tension you are so much producing. And so it seems like pretty well verified that if you put the right amounts of mechanical tension through your muscles and you eat the right amount of food to enhance recovery, you will grow muscle. Bar none, unless you're in the like 0.5 or 1%, which have a really hard time growing muscle. It's a very, very small percentage of people. So with that in mind, it's really about, okay, if we know we need to have mechanical tension, the question is how much, right? How much mechanical tension, right? We've got all these different muscles all over our body, right? And so it seems like anywhere between, depending on who you are and how new you are, between 4 sets and honestly, like the research is looking at like up to 40 sets, 50 sets per week at this point, is how many sets you need to grow muscle, right? Most people are going to do that anywhere between 4 sets and maybe up to 20, depending on where you are. And the reason I say that is because if you've never lifted a weight before and you go to the gym and you do like 4 sets to work on a particular muscle group, like your elbow flexors or your pushing muscles, however you want to label them, that will be enough to start growing muscle. Just as you get further along, your body gets less well at adapting because it's already getting closer to its genetic potential. Your body's already well versed at it. It's no longer as new of a stimulus. And so you require a little bit more dosing to do that. But anywhere between 5 up to 40 sets, but again, 5 to 20 is usually what's most feasible for people. And as long as the repetitions are anywhere between 5 repetitions and 30, you will grow muscle. So what does this kind of mean practically? If you want to grow, let's say, your biceps muscle, your other elbow flexors, right? You could do anywhere between those 5 sets if you're really new, up to 20 sets per week, and you can almost bracket them out however you want to. You could do let's say like 1 set Monday through Friday to get your 5 sets. Or if you're trying to get 20, you could do 4 sets on Monday, 4 sets on Tuesday, 4 sets on Wednesday, 4 sets on Thursday, 4 sets on Friday, and you'll still grow muscle. It's really about getting the getting the right amount of sets that you need in the 5 to 30 rep range to grow muscle. Is that clear so far?
Yeah. And I that's interesting that you're talking about per week. And I have kind of seen this pop up as I've doing some research where it sounds like it's not necessary it's not necessarily per session is what I'm getting out of this. So like I do chest day, I do leg day, and I do focus on these, but there are some things that I kind of hit multiple times a week. So for example, I split my back day a little bit. But my chest day means that I'm doing a total of probably about 15 sets, but in different angles and in different exercises, but they're all focused on that push.
Mhm. Yeah, that works, right? I mean, it works. It really kind of depends on like who you're, what your goals are, and it gets a little bit more contextual. Like the deeper you want to go on this, the more contextual it gets, right? One of the reasons why bodybuilders who are like closer on the professional end often end up doing a lot of sets on like a Monday, and they might only hit their chest once a week is because it takes a lot longer for their tendons to recover because of how much weight they're lifting and how much volume they're doing. And if they kind of go again anytime sooner than that, they might not have their tendons heal soon enough. And over time, they get tendonitis and things might not feel as good, right? That's like one of the reasons why they might do that. The lay person is probably going to be better doing either like a push pull legs, like twice over, like push pull legs, rest day, or push pull legs, rest, push pull legs, rest, and just run that cycle every 4 days. Or they might be better off, depending on who they are, just doing like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, full body workouts, if that's what allows for their time and schedule, or doing like an upper, lower, off, upper, lower, off, upper, lower, off. A lot of it is kind of depends on, if we're talking about like how we bracket this all up, what kind of works for your schedule and your goals, right? If you're someone who is like single, you've got work, but then you've got a lot of the free time to pursue your hobbies and passions, you can work out 6, 7 days a week. And if you manage it right, that's fine. You can recover from that. You can do it. Maybe not max effort every time, but you can do that. If you're someone who has got like 2 kids at home and you're lucky to get to the gym 3 times a week, you're probably looking at more of like a full body workout, trying to get these different volumes of exercise in, right? If you're a professional, you might even train twice a day, right? You might do like AMPN workouts if your job is to be a professional bodybuilder. Again, it all really comes down to who you are. But if we're getting the right amount of like sets per body part in per week, and it's in that 5 to 20-ish rep range, you've got a lot of freedom in terms of how you want to bracket that out, which is great because it means that you can create a program that's going to work for you versus having to follow any kind of rigorous way of doing things.
Mhm. So you did mention effort, and that's
Mhm.
another thing that I've been looking at, and to get to really excite that muscle growth, from what I understand, is you got to get close to failure. You don't have to hit failure. I personally do, but you don't have to. But you need to push yourself enough where you're getting there. So this is, I mean, I don't get. I don't feel pain when I do this, but I know when I first started working out, I would call it pain. But there's that old slogan, no, what is it? No pain, no gain, you know. And this might be something more of a beginner if they just start hitting the gym, you know, like putting their muscles in that kind of tension feels like pain to them. If it might feel like this is not something that they should be allowing to their body.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 things here. I'll try not to forget the second thing in lieu of the first one. The first one is like pain is very subjective. I deal with this a lot in my practice. Most of my practice is working with people who've got pain and discomfort and are trying to get out of that. We have to learn how to build muscle around that to help them and all that
Mm,
kind of stuff. But like pain is very a subjective thing, right? I may ask one person what they're feeling and they'll say, "Oh, I've got like muscle pain." What they're really telling me is they've got like the pump or things are burning when they're doing it. Other people may describe an actual pain in their tendons or some actual real discomfort they're experiencing. And they're both correct in the sense that they're experiencing discomfort, but the true nature of what's happening underneath the skin is very much an interpretation their brain's making based on their physiology and all the information they're getting from all their nerves at one time, right? So that's another like bit of a complex topic. We can always go there if you want to. When it comes to the actual repetitions from failure, like how hard do I have to push it? The research shows you can probably stay 2 to 3 repetitions away from failure, maybe even sometimes 4, depending on how new you are, and you'll still build muscle. Here's where I think for people who like to go to the gym, this becomes an important piece. The closer you get to working to failure, the more it taxes and exhausts your nervous system. It takes a lot to really push to true failure. And if you're doing that on every set, your nervous system is going to start catching up with you. A lot of people push themselves in the gym and they start waking up tired every morning. It's not because they're not sleeping enough. They just literally can't sleep enough to recover from the amount of nervous system strain they're putting on their bodies for the 45 to 90 minutes of high intense resistance training they're doing every time they're at the gym, right? This is why a lot of people ought to maybe just do 2 to 3 reps in the bank and then maybe leave that last set as a total to failure. That way they can still get all the benefits, but they're not actually burning out their nervous system, right? You can only push yourself really, really hard for so long before you start waking up tired all the time. And then if you wake up tired all the time, you can't really push yourself the way you ought to in the gym. You can't get the amount of volume. You probably can't get to failure as much anymore. Athletes go through this actually strategically when they train for the Olympics. So the way athletes peak for the Olympics, like an Olympic sprinter, for example, they don't run their best times all year. They actually have strategic cycles of like ramping up, doing more sets, more reps, going further to failure for a lot of their resistance training leading up to the Olympics. They might be tired 2 to 3 weeks out and they go through what they call a taper, where they slowly let volume come down. They slowly let the amount of work they do come down. They might keep the intensity high, but what ends up happening is right around when they start competing, their fatigue drops off. They compensate even higher than they were before because their body's like, oh, I'm really recovered. And then they hit personal bests and world bests and Olympic bests at the Olympics because they're letting this happen at just the right time. So it's a very well established thing that happens in the nervous system when we start pushing it strategically like that. And we just got to be cautious about how we're doing things in the gym, right? So I don't know if have you gone through something like that before where like you have a month of just pushing it really, really hard. Then after a while, you just like wake up like more and more fatigued and feeling just more sluggish all the time? Or is that not something you've experienced just yet on your journey?
I haven't experienced that, but I do take pretty big breaks. Like I do chest day once a week. I do legs day once a week, and then I have I am at the gym for 4 days out of 7 days, so I give myself quite a bit of rest. Um, I'll need to play with that. That's an interesting idea because I wonder if I'm just leaving stuff on the table by not have experimented that. And I think
Yeah.
in high school I wrestled and we would go to the weight room and we'd work out with the football players and it was just instilled since I was a kid that you got to like push yourself as much as you can. And I think that sort of was built in. So I didn't even try to keep any reps in reserve, and I might be
Yeah.
already at the point where I do have a rep in reserve, but my brain has caught up and it says this is actually when you need to stop. And so that could be what I'm doing. Like I might be doing it not realizing it. I'm not sure, but I will play with that. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah. There's a couple of interesting things there. I People's ability to understand really where they're at from a failure perspective, typically at the beginning isn't great. I don't know where you're at in your journey. I have clients, one of them, I'm going to call her Mary just because she hasn't given me permission to talk about her name. Mary, like we were working together and we got to a place where like she's comfortable working out on her own and she's asking me why the weights aren't going up. And I said, okay, well, we meet once a month to rejig her program, work on some body stuff, see what she needs to be improving on to help some discomfort in her body and in some of the injuries that she's had. And one of the things I said to her is like, we're going to spend this session going through the exercise I've given you. I'm not doing anything new, but I just want to push you a little bit. And you're going to tell me when you think you've got like a couple reps left in the bank. And then we're going to see how far we can push you. We're going to be safe about it. We're going to see what we can do. And there were exercises where she's like at rep number 17, she's like, I think I can only do a couple more. I'm like, okay, keep going, keep pushing, keep going. She'll get to 30 plus. And it was a big eye opening thing for her. She's like, I don't think I've been pushing it as much as I could. And I said, yeah, probably. So like, let's rejig your numbers based on this and start pushing it. Now she's got way better pushing it. The weights get lot higher, a lot quicker. She's getting stronger. She's in her 60s, right? Like that's the other thing I probably should mention. But this is one of those things where often you don't really know where you are until you really give it a good push. Like the question of like, is it appropriate for you right now? If you got pain discomfort is another conversation. Interestingly enough, we're going to talk about managing loads. I don't know if you've ever noticed this or not. The last Olympics, which country is it? Is it Iceland or Norway? Sorry, yeah, it's Norway. Norway swept the Winter Olympics, like top 11 cross country skiers, like top in all the sports, like they crushed it. And if you actually look at Norway per capita, they produce the most elite athletes per capita in their population, right? They produce the most Olympic medalists per capita, right? which is absolutely crazy. And you wonder, well, how can they possibly do it? It's a small little Nordic country, 3 to 5 million people, maybe up to 10, but really not a lot like America, where there's like 400 million plus, or Canada, where there's 30 million plus, 40 million plus. And you look at what they do and the amount of sports science and how much they actually manage their athletes is absolutely crazy. They're constantly taking blood for their athletes to measure different metabolites to see how recovered they are, how much they're pushing themselves. Every athlete they have doesn't do the same program. They all do different amounts of training. These 11 athletes they had that finished like first to 11 in some of these cross country skiing events, none of them did the same program. They all did different volumes of training to train for this event, but it was whatever they could recover from and whatever they could do. So one of the things that is hard to do, I think, when it comes to the world of resistance training, I don't think this really exists right now, and I could be wrong. And if someone shows me later, I'd be really happy, is some kind of program or app or something that takes your blood work that actually shows you how far you are along your journey in terms of training, right? The best apps that I've seen that do this very, very well, it's from, I think a lot of apps are starting to do this, but I know Renaissance Periodization was the first app to do this. There's this guy named Mike Israel who used to be a doctor and a professor at a bunch of different universities in the States. And Renaissance Periodization themselves only hires PhDs or masters of sports science and nutrition and dietitian to work with their athletes and coaches. Very high level of education is what I'm saying. And what they've done with their app is they have it set up so when you create your program, they have it set up so that each week you do either a little bit more volume in terms of the amount of sets that you're doing, or you do a little bit more intensity in terms of how many reps from reserve you're doing, or you'll do a little bit more XYZ. And each week you keep trying to push yourself a little bit more and more. And they have rating scales built in so you can rate how hard your workouts were, how sore you got. And then once you get to a place where you're not recovering anymore, you're really sore, your repetitions will start going down, then they say, okay, time to schedule a deload week where you take like a week off, let yourself recover, and then you start the program again. But they've got it figured out such that you can actually take some of these basic metrics of how many sets am I doing per week? How many reps am I leaving in the bank on each exercise? How challenging were the workouts for me? Some simple metrics, and their app's algorithm just allows you to keep improving until you're not anymore, till you're burnt out, and then take some time off and reset. It's about the best we can do right now for the average gym goer if they want hypertrophy and strength to start training in the most scientifically smart way.
That's very cool. I'm looking this up now, and that's why you're seeing me change my focus here.
All
But
good.
yeah, I found it. Renaissance periodization. Actually, that's one of the questions that I really wanted to learn from you about, which is this is something I have experienced frequently, not frequently, but through phases where I'll see a steady growth in the amount that I can lift. Either that means more repetitions, my form is a little bit better, and then every now and then I can add more weights. And I got to tell you, that's a good feeling. I love it when that happens. And I found so much variation in that. So I'm about a year in, and I found in weightlifting, and I found so much variation in a lot of ways. Like there'll be, say, one day where I'm doing an extra 2 or even 3 reps on my curls. Just suddenly I'm doing an extra 2 or 3 reps. But then I'm doing 1 or 2 less reps on like a cable lateral raise for my shoulders. And so it's, my biceps that particular day has gotten stronger, but my shoulder on that particular day feels like it got weaker. But what I'm also seeing is exactly what you just said, where I'll have periods where I get stronger. Everything is good, and then it flatlines for a little bit, it may go down. And if I just stick with it, it comes, I'll get another strength gain in a month or so. And that, I think, dealing with that variation is it tests you mentally. It's like, can you stick with this even though you're seeing ups and downs? And that's honestly, it's pretty difficult. I can see why people quit the gym. And I certainly have many times in the past.
So what's the question in there? Is the question like, why does that happen, or what are we looking at?
Is that normal, and why?
Okay, so is it normal to have like lots of variation, that kind
Yeah.
of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple different things that come to my mind in terms of the variation. And without knowing the human being, it's hard to tell, right? So let me ask you this: are you always doing the body groups and the exercises in the same sequence and order, or are you doing, for example, chest first one day, like let's say biceps the second that day, and then another day doing biceps first, then chest? Or are you always doing the same body part sequential order?
Same order, same order. Every now and then I change it, but that's only because I have to wait on a machine. But for the most part, it's the same order.
Okay, I gotcha. So a couple things come to my mind. First, depending on like what exercises you choose, some things get emphasized more than others. If you're doing like a pull up, for example, and you're having like more of like a supinated grip where the palms are facing in towards you, you're lining up your bicep now to pull you a little bit more. If you rotate that arm so your palm is facing the machine, more of like a traditional like wide grip pull up, and you try to pull up that way, you're kind of now shifting the bicep muscles or other elbow flexors out of the way. So you will recruit different amounts of muscle in some areas depending on the kind of lifts and exercises that you choose. That could be one answer to that question. The other thing could also be that depending on how you're coming in that day, your nervous system might be either like primed to do some more exercising or it might not be. People tend to very often, if they're a morning person, perform really very well in the morning. If they're an evening person, they'll perform very well in the evening, right? And if they have to change the time they're exercising, that might also fluctuate some of the results that they're going through. When it comes to this peculiar question of like sticking with something over time and then having getting lower and then getting better, I don't know if there's like a break in there somewhere where you're just grinding out for a month, things keep getting worse, and then eventually they get better. I don't know if is that what you're is that like the is that the position I'm assuming you're in, where you're like, I'm doing the same exercises, it'll be great for 2 weeks, I'll stagnate for 2 weeks, and then I'll get better all of a sudden with no break, or is there a break somewhere in there?
Uh, no break, no break.
No break. Yeah. I'm not, to be honest with you on that one, I'm not 100% sure why that would get better. But I will be honest with you. I see something very similar to some of my clients where all of a sudden, over the course of like a day or two, we'll come back and work out again. We're doing some same exercise, and all of a sudden, things just kind of take off compared to the way they were before. And if all things are being absolutely the same, like same time of day, same nutrition, same recovery level, assuming all those kind of things, I'm not 100% sure why. I have seen that as well. I don't know if there's some kind of supra increase in compensation that happens for some mechanism. Maybe someone can point that out to me. I haven't done a lot of research on it myself, but I do find that thing. The only thing I can think of, then this is purely hypothetical, would be you grind it up enough to the point that you don't give your body any other option other than to like, it really feels like it has to progress, but that's not really a scientific answer. So I'm not really sure why that would happen all of a sudden. If things would all of a sudden just get way better without a break. Otherwise, I'm looking at like subtle differences in times you're training, exercise variation, and order. Those would be the things that I think about, or
Mm.
potentially nutrition. I don't know if sometimes people are getting less protein than they think, and all of a sudden they get more protein for a couple of weeks, and they got the building blocks to recover better now. That's the only other thing I can think of that may apply to this particular scenario that you're telling me about.
Yeah, and well, I I shouldn't say way better. I should say incrementally better. So it's like for the same weights, I can do 2 extra reps suddenly, and then that becomes my new baseline. But before I
It could be a
reach
mental
that, I
thing.
might get some variation that goes up and down along the way.
Yeah, I mean, and it could be like a mental thing as well, right? I mean, sometimes it's hard for us to gauge how we're doing physiologically, how we're doing nutritionally. Like it's hard. Like, are we really putting stuff? These are a lot. There's a lot of things in the world of exercise that are still very much open to interpretation, even though we're doing our best to qualify it and quantify it. If that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah. Now you mentioned protein, and I don't know how much you want to get into like nutrition and macros, but in terms of that as rounding out, sort of, you put in all this time and energy in exercising in what I would say the hard part. But if you don't round it out properly with nutrition, at least my experience, and this has been that if I don't get my nutrition and my macros down, then I'm kind of wasting. I'm not wasting my time, but I'm not getting the muscle building or the weight loss that I want if I don't get that in check. So that's been something big over the last year that I've figured out for, what works for me, and maybe there's ways to improve that.
Yeah, so the interesting and yeah, like this is something I got from like Renaissance Periodization, and they've taken a look at all the nutrition data. I'm not a nutrition person per se. I always divert to the people who are really great nutrition. But what the research looks at is this: if we were to take like a pie with 100 pieces, and we said how much do each of these things impact muscle growth and strength gain, right? Let's use muscle growth hypertrophy for an example. 50% of it comes down to, are you getting enough calories? So that's like 50% of that pie. Half that pie is, are you getting enough calories? The next 30% is, are you getting the right macros? And that's already 80% of muscle gain. That's already 80% of muscle gain. So am I getting the right amount of calories, and am I getting the right enough of the different macronutrients? From there, I think the next, if I'm not mistaken, the next 10% takes it to 90% is going to be like food quality, processed food versus natural, healthy foods, more nutrient dense, we'll call it. And then if we look at the last like 5 to 10%, it comes down to like supplementation and nutrient timing. I can't quite see what you got there. So sure, I'm just going to move you over to a different screen for a second.
Yeah.
I don't know what you got there. Right? Renaissance. This would be body spec. This is I don't, this might be their review. If it's from Renaissance Periodization. Yeah, this might be, let's see what you got. Keep scrolling here. Yeah, they're going to say a lot of stuff that I've said here. Where's that
Yeah.
nutrition piece here? Right. Yeah. So this is more like the actual, looks like the actual recommendations versus like the chart that I was telling you about. Um, but like, to highlight my point while you're looking through all that kind of stuff there, I can't see it. If you're eating, right, the right amount of calories, and you're getting enough protein, right, which is going to be around 1 gram per pound of body weight. And even then, you probably don't even need that much. It's probably closer to 0.8 and 0.7. And then you're getting like the right amount of fats, which is like very minimal. And then you got your rest of your nutrition, carbohydrates dialed in. That's already 80% of your nutrition right there, right? I mean, when you think that only 10% of what you eat processed versus like natural, nutritional, dense foods leads to hypertrophy, that's pretty crazy, right? Things shift a little bit if we're looking at like healthy lifestyle versus like pure muscle gain. But there's a reason why a lot of bodybuilders do like the dirty bulk and they still gain muscle. It's because they're getting enough calories, they're getting enough of the protein and the other macronutrients, and they're just eating all the time. And and I'm sure they're taking like special sports supplements in quotations, right, to help gain muscle, which is a whole other kip and caboodle. But that's really like most of it, right? Do you feel way better if you're eating like proteins that are like beef and chicken, and your carbohydrates come from like potatoes and whole grains, and you're getting your fats from the avocados and like butter and the right oils? Do you feel much better than if you're having like bunch of trans fats and eating donuts? Probably. That's probably gonna help you feel better and have better workouts. Probably help you optimize that. But if you can just like eat crappy foods but get enough of the right stuff that you need, you're still going to gain muscle, right? It's just, when you look at it from like a practical perspective, do I feel better day to day, and can I stay more aligned with my goals if I'm eating right healthy foods? Yeah, probably, right? But if you're the kind of person where you've just got sheer discipline and you don't care what kind of food you put in your body, sure, you can drink whey protein all day, have like processed sugar and still gain weight. There's a real interesting article. I think it was published either Stanford or Harvard. I forget which one. You can look it up, but there's a professor that to prove that you can just eat crappy food and lose weight, he had just something like Twinkies, and that's all he ate for a month. And he lost some crazy amount of weight, 10 pounds, over 10 pounds in a month just by eating Twinkies, just to show it doesn't necessarily matter what it is that you eat. If you're in a caloric deficit, you will lose body fat. Did he probably lose a ton of muscle? Sure. Is that healthy? Probably not. But it just goes to show how important this calorie thing is. So to answer your question, right? 80% of this like gaining muscle aesthetic thing is really the right amount of calories and the right amount of protein, carbs, and fats. The rest of like the timing and the healthy foods is a much smaller piece of that pie.
Mm. Well, I think even like getting to that 80%, I think that's, you know, I I would be surprised if that is common knowledge outside of your expertise. You know, I mean, you think about this all the time, and this is like second nature to you. And I do wonder how much of this is general knowledge. And I'll give you an example, which is that you just talked about calorie deficit, caloric deficit. I can't tell you how many times I hear about this. Let's put GLP-1 to the side and we'll get to that. But like, I can't tell you how many times throughout my life I've heard people say, hey, you know, if you eat turmeric or whatever, it'll help you burn more weight. Or, you know, like a lot of these things are suggestive that
Yeah,
you can increase your metabolic consumption of calories without having to change anything else. And that's just so flat out wrong, right? And like
yeah,
GLP-1s doesn't do that either. GLP-1s just reduces your calorie intake because it reduces your appetite. It doesn't burn
correct.
fat on its own. And I think that's important. And I personally went through this process where I tried a lot of different things. And I do remember at one point I was convinced that you don't need a calorie deficit. Like, I didn't believe the calorie deficit. I just believed in the calorie source, which is to say, if your source of your calories is healthy, then you don't have an issue. But that's not true either, right? Like if you're eating 3,000 calories of steaks every day, you're still going to put on weight, even though it's, you know, a lot of protein. And honestly, I think that's probably impossible. I don't know if anyone can actually do that. Like if you manage to eat 3,000 calories of steaks every day, that's pretty impressive in my opinion. But you would, you know, just because it's like healthy calories doesn't mean that you won't put on weight. But what the good thing about this is that it's actually very simple. A calorie deficit reduces your weight. Now,
Mhm.
I remember that study you're talking about, and I think Frito Lay's was a big part of his diet. But the crazy thing is, if you try to do that, if you try to eat like we call them empty calories, right? I don't know if that's still a thing. Empty calories that have no nutritional value. You're not getting anything out of it.
Yeah.
You're just burning the budget that you have without getting anything out of it. For me to live on, say, 18, if I remember the number correctly, he was doing like 17 to 1,800 calories a day.
1,700, I think was the number. I think it was 1,700 if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong. But you're right, somewhere in there, ballpark.
Yeah, that's like 5 packs of Skittles, you know? That's insane. That's all you get to eat the whole day. My problem is if I try to do that is, I'll get headaches, I won't be able to sleep, I won't be able to focus, like, I'll just be off on my day. So, like, I know that
Mhm.
if I'm in a calorie deficit without any nutritional value, I will crash and burn. And so even now what I'm doing is I'm on a very mild deficit. But the important thing I think here is that the math is actually very simple, which is to say your caloric intake must be less than your burn rate. Let's get
Yeah.
into burn
And
rate. How like I have some ideas on how I computed my burn rate. I chat a lot with AI for some of this stuff, but you know, before I get into blaming the robots for anything wrong, I want to hear your thoughts on that.
listen, we can talk about AI and fitness as well. That's an interesting topic. When it comes to like your metabolic rate, calories in, calories out, there's a couple things that come. Like first, and this is I'll just glaze over this quickly, but it bears repeating because it is coming from like base knowledge. Maybe not base knowledge, but I think it's a common misnomer. Like people are terrible estimators of how much they're actually eating. Like if you go ahead and
Mm,
actually
yeah.
spend a month measuring out your food, you're very surprised at how much you actually would be consuming. Measuring out a tablespoon of peanut butter is not for a lot of people to begin with a tablespoon of peanut butter, right? If you weigh at 15 grams of peanut butter, which is a tablespoon, right? It actually, for a lot of people, can be much smaller, excuse me, much smaller than they think. And, you know, if we're talking about people trying to create a calorie deficit, like if you're trying to burn, let's just say like a pound of fat a week, and we're looking at, you know, 600, 700 calories a day, call it, and you're overestimating how much peanut butter you're having by 200 calories, you're going to be missing a huge part of your deficit, right? I mean, you can go work out and then come home and eat 2 donuts, and you've already essentially messed up your calorie deficit if you're eating the rest of your diet the way you plan. So it's one of those things that's a huge misnomer. So most people at some point if it's something they can manage, they don't have kids or anything like that, or even they do have kids, but they make time for it, going about and like measuring your food for a month will actually give you a way better idea on how to intuitively eat, because you will learn from a subconscious perspective what food amounts actually look like. And I've done that a number of different times, and which helps me without counting calories, either lose or gain weight depending on where I'm at, because I have just a better idea of intuitively how to read food from looking at it and cooking it myself. If we're looking at like what constitutes like energy burn, calories in versus calories out, I think you and I talked about this in our pre-chat, which is I like the idea of like a bathtub with water in it. And if your body weight is water in a bathtub, turning your tap on and having more water come in to the bathtub through the tap is like food that you eat in a day. And then having the drain open is how much food or energy you're burning in a day, calories you're burning in a day, and water coming out. If you have the tap open at the same rate as the drain is open, the water in the tub will stay the same. If you plug the drain, turn the water on, water in the tub will go up, and then you turn the water off, unplug it, water goes out, water in the tub goes down. Same idea with body weight. We're just trying to manage energy in versus energy out based on our goals. And so energy in is really like anything that you eat. I think that's pretty straightforward. Some things have more calories than you think, like some vegetables, like sweet potato. People sometimes look at that as no calories, but they have more than they think. Same thing with corn, that kind of thing. And then energy out, which is like energy burn in the day, which is what you're asking about. There are a couple different things. Us human beings all have muscle on our body, and we can look at those as glucose disposal units. Muscle is not an inexpensive tissue. There's a reason why if people don't exercise and they just quote unquote diet or try to lose body fat, they lose some muscle on the process, because muscle is a metabolically taxing tissue, which means that if you do resistance training and you put more muscle on your body, you burn more energy per day by having that. I forget the exact numbers. It's not a ton. I want to say it's something like you can probably look this up. I'm going to guess it's 8 to 10 extra calories per day per pound of muscle, but you end up building more muscle over your lifetime. That kind of adds up. But here's like the other interesting thing is if you have like 20 extra pounds of muscle on your body and now you're doing any kind of like activities, whether you start doing more hikes or you start doing like more intense cardio, or you're doing resistance training, using your body weight, you're now lifting more while you're doing that. So you're going to just burn more energy just by having heavier body weight, both during activity and at rest, right? Those are one of the things that we got to be looking at. And then we actually look at resistance training. I think sometimes people are going to be burning less calories than they think during resistance training, depending on how they're doing it. Other people might be surprised at how much more they're burning. And then there's just like walking around, right? Like all those steps that you take walking your dog for an hour a day, those things might add up to a couple hundred calories, a few hundred calories, depending on who you are. Smaller people, less, like larger people, more. If we're to sit at a desk all day, you and I talking, we're not going to be burning a ton of energy. If we're going to be being active and spending more time on our feet, we're going to burn way more energy, right? I think that kind of goes without saying. And then interestingly, this is kind of like the fascinating thing. The people who tend to just be those people that are super lean and just don't seem to gain body fat no matter what, that like everyone seems to hate, quote unquote, they actually seem to be extreme fidgeters, where like they're constantly tapping or moving their hands around, or they're like tapping their feet. And it's actually just surprising how much more energy they burn just by doing that in a day. Some of these people burn 300, 400, 500 extra calories just by being extreme fidgeters and just having jobs maybe where they walk around a lot more. And because of that, they tend just to burn a lot more extra weight. So they don't seem to gain it as much as other people. Ultimately, though, at the end of the day, it's kind of like, are you sedentary? Do you have lots of muscle on your body? And then you do things that use your body, that challenge it some, that ask you to either burn more calories while you're doing it, but then also consume more in terms of recovery afterwards. Mm-hmm. If you look at the science and the research, if you do, again, this kind of depends on how hard you train and exercise. If you do like a really hard cardiovascular session of like interval training, where let's say you're doing 4 minutes at a max amount of time, rest 4 minutes, do 4 more minutes max, rest 4 minutes, 4 max, rest 4 minutes, 4 more max, cool down, which is a very common once per week cardiovascular training program, 4x4, right? 4 repeats of 4 maximal effort, followed by recovery over the course of half hour. The amount of glucose that your body will then use and consume over the next 24 to 40 hours goes up. You become way more efficient at burning energy over that time, over the next, like, about, I think it's 24 to 36 hours. I shouldn't speak out of turn there. And then you also become way better at bringing in glucose into your muscle. So if you're going to go to like a big family event where, you know, you're going to go gangbusters on food, it's a really good idea to do some really high intense cardio before, because your muscles will suck all that stuff up. Resistance training is kind of interesting because it's the opposite. Instead of it peaking really highly after exercise, like I think it's like anywhere between 2 and 6 hours after exercise, and then dropping down over the next 24 to 36 hours. Resistance training actually peaks around the 36 to 48 hour mark, and then it slowly tapers off afterwards. So you actually have an increase of metabolic burn in the days after you do resistance training for a muscle group, up until 48, 72 hours, depending on how hard you go. And then once you stimulate it again, it goes up again and then down. So there are different things that you can do to play around with your metabolic burn and metabolic churn, metabolic rate, through resistance training and cardiovascular activity.
Okay.
I know that
So
was
that's a
quite
lot more
verbose there.
complicated than I learned from my AI tooling.
What did
Like it
AI
sounds
say?
like
What did AI say?
I'll show you. I'm gonna share my screen for a second. Because I'll play with this. AI pointed me towards this idea, the TDEE, total daily energy expenditure. And the way I've been using it, so you could put your information directly in here. So it goes your male, female, age, weight, height, how often you exercise, what your activity level is like, and then your body fat. And this kind of touches on your muscle versus your fat burn. I played with this, and if I put my numbers in here direct, I'll get something back like 2,600. When I talk to AI and I'll tell it this is my daily routine. I work out 4 days a week. I lift. These are the number of exercises I do. I don't really walk much. I work at home. I'm usually sitting. Sometimes I stand on my standing desk. I gave it all this information, and what Grok said was your day TDE, your daily expenditure rate in terms of calories, is something between 2,400 and 2,600 a day. So then when I do my budgeting, right? Like you use the bathtub analogy, I think about it like as a budget. I have a calorie budget. I'm allowed to eat 2,500 calories a day of food. And within that 2,500 calories, I have to keep my brain alert. I have to keep my body, like I have to be energetic. I have to feel healthy. I have to get my nutrients in. And very, very importantly, I got to get my protein in. So I'm about 165 pounds, which means about 165 grams of protein. So, and I actually want to cut weight. So I'm doing maybe about 20, between, I would say probably around 2,300 calories a day, very mild deficit. And Glenn, 100%, I had to measure everything. I have a little scoop. I got like a tiny little scale. I measured I did this really, like really strictly for maybe about 3 days. And then I developed a feel for it, and I'm probably going a little bit over now because I don't do it as much, but it helped me rein in what I was eating, and it helped me be a lot more selective about what I eat. Like as an example, I used to eat a lot more peanuts. I think they're a great snack, but they're actually very high calorie, and they have some protein in them, which is nice. But a handful of peanuts, man, that is so many calories. And I still have them, but I just have a lot less because I didn't realize how easy it is to overindulge in peanuts, which I thought was a great snack because again, it is filling and it feels small, but it's actually very high calorie. So that has helped a lot in the process. But yeah, that's what AI told me. AI essentially pointed me towards the TDE calculator.
Yeah. I mean, like, a great tool that's been around forever, right? Those things have been around even before AI, right? Those things are still very, very present. It can be hard to measure. Most people are gonna probably see the most accurate benefits with like an iWatch or a Whoop band or an Aura ring or something like that, because those algorithms do a really good job measuring the amount of energy output there is. And then the other side of that too is they can measure the energy output during resistance training, right? Doing like arms is not going to be anywhere near the same caloric challenge as doing legs would be. And then what's the effect of that energy burn wise and nutrient burn wise in the hours and days after you use them, right? If people just did upper body and ignore their lower body, they're just not going to be having the same energy expenditure over the next 24 to 40 hours as if they were doing legs, right? I mean, there's all these small little nuanced things that you can be taking a look at. I mean, that's a great place to start if someone doesn't want to do a wearable, or like that's just not their thing, which is like totally cool. At the end of the day, this is where like another important piece comes into play, which is like what gets measured gets managed. I think it's a Peter Drucker quote. I'm pretty sure he's like an investor philosopher. I think I'm not quite sure, to be honest. Or if I've heard people in the spiritual world say, where intention where energy flows and intention goes, that's where you kind of see results. And so one of the things that people don't do is they probably don't necessarily measure their body weight enough to get an idea as if things change the way they want to. You can get a $30 Renfo scale or any other brand scale that'll tell you your body fat percentage, amount of muscle that you have, water, and all that kind of stuff. And is it going to be highly accurate? No. You need to go through like a DEXA scan to do something like that. Like you need like there's tools that are way more accurate to do that. But what we're not necessarily looking for is like high accuracy. What we're looking for is trending. If you're going to take your body weight measurements Monday, Wednesday, Friday, first thing in the morning after you relieve yourself in the bathroom, before you drink water or anything like that, and then you measure yourself on your scale and you do that, you will have a ongoing record, which is quite clear in terms of how you're trending. If you're doing that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you do that for a month and you get like 13 measurements, right? Or like whatever, 12 measurements, you'll see, oh, I was at 15.1% on day one, 15.2 on the Wednesday. Oh, I'm down to 14.9 on the Friday, 15 again on the Monday. But then you keep going through that. Then by the end of the next month, you're down a full body fat percentage. You're like 1.5%. You can see that trend going downwards, because we do know that depending on what you're eating, you might end up holding more water for different reasons, right? You have more salt one day. You don't eat as much one day, so you have less salt. You drop water weight. There's all these different things that will impact your day-to-day body weight, and these metrics that the scale might pick up. But if you take it consistently Monday, Wednesday, Friday at the same times, you'll get a trending average of, am I actually in a deficit or am I not? And if you don't actually have things to measure, like sets and reps in the gym, which you are measuring, if you don't have that for body weight stuff, it becomes a lot harder to figure out, is what I'm doing nutritionally working for me?
Yeah. And we should say a calorie, correct me if I'm wrong on this, one pound, to cut a pound, you have to have a deficit of 3,500 calories. Is that right? That number?
Correct.
All
Yeah,
right.
correct.
So this is like this goes back to what I mentioned earlier, where it takes some sort of mental discipline to be able to say, okay, depending on the deficit that you can sustainably reach based off your energy output and your metabolic burn rate, what is a reasonable number of, like, what's a reasonable weight loss for you? And generally the case, and this has been my example, this has happened multiple times as well, where the more overweight I am, the easier it is to burn weight. And then, the slimmer I get, the harder it is to burn. But I also found that where I'm at today, a reasonable uh weight loss is maybe 1 to 2 pounds. I would say 1 to 2 pounds a month, but I also delude myself that I'm putting on muscular weight. So I like to believe that, I'm cutting more fat than I see on the scale. But that's a different thing. The I think the more important thing is that, okay, if you're only on a 100 calorie deficit, we're talking 1 month to burn a pound, which for
Good
some
luck.
people that might, where I think, the slimmer you get depending where you're at. But then you have to acknowledge, like, the the day-to-day variance could be high. One thing I did, and I still kind of do this, but not as much, is I would weigh myself before and after I eat. Or I would weigh myself before and after, like when I wake up in the morning and I have water and coffee, and then I weigh myself before and after that. So I get a sense of how my weight fluctuates with what I put in my body. So, like, I could, as soon as I wake up, I will weigh maybe 163, 164. But after I have coffee and water, that goes up to like 167. Essentially, I'm hydrating. I've got 4 pounds of water that I put in. I drink a lot of water. And then, I could do similar things with before and after I have a meal. I mean, I'm not saying everyone needs to do all that, but it does give you a sense of the day-to-day fluctuations are not, necessarily correlated to actually burning fat. But
Yeah.
Glenn, I would love to kind of start back at how you got into all this. Like we've been focusing on weightlifting. And I
Mhm.
think you discovered for me weightlifting like proper. I did bands, I did jujitsu. I mentioned I never really did calisthenics, but I know that is popular for a lot of people. Um, I've tried running, I've tried anything and everything, but I think you hit weightlifting quite early in your life.
Yeah, so, I mean, do you want the long version or the short version?
We have. I tell you what. I want to refill my coffee. I also got to use the bathroom. So why don't we reconvene in 5 minutes? Does that work for you?
Perfect, let's do it.
All right, let's come back in five.
Alright.
And then
Cheers,
we'll
buddy.
do the long version. Welcome back, Glenn. Let's get going. So you were just about to walk us through your fitness journey, which started a lot sooner than my experience with weightlifting. You had jumped in when you were a young growing boy.
Yeah. Young growing boy is quite accurate. So, I think I was probably, like, 13 or 14 the first time I got, like, beat up and extorted for money. So,
What are we
walked into
talking? Are
this
we
gym.
talking like? Are we talking like? Give me $1.50 so I can buy ice cream at the school cafeteria. Or are we talking like?
Yeah, and
y-
yeah, but in progressively larger amounts for sure. Yeah, yeah. That kind
Mhm.
of thing. Yeah. Listen, I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there.
All
But yeah, I
right.
mean that's essentially it. Like I remember walking into this gymnasium, first day of school, and like you're there and everyone is like a fresh new face. All the public schools send their kids here. So one or two kids, but not a lot. I didn't really know anyone in this gym class. And then the gym had that kind of like moldy, stale gym smell that all gyms in high school seem to have. Floors were freshly polished. And I'm looking around at all the different kids in my class, and we all have the same looks on our faces, like feeling everything out because you're a teenager, things are a little awkward. That's how things are. And I locked eyes with this one guy, and he was really, really angry and upset, and I couldn't stop taking my eyes off him, and I felt like this ice in my veins, be like, why does he look so upset with me? And I had this kind of realization, which was a week earlier, I'd played in a championship soccer game against this guy, and him and I got in an altercation. And he ended up getting kicked out of the game. We ended up winning it 2-1, and there was a championship, so we were all excited. And I'm guessing he didn't forget about it. And I guess when I
But you
say
forgot
like,
about it. You didn't like recognize him
I mean, no, I
immediately.
mean like it's yeah, I mean it's just like I didn't like it didn't click. Like I at that time and sometimes still now I'm very like in my own head about things when I am in large groups. Like I don't love going to large groups and having to meet a bunch of people. It's not my favorite thing. I like being with like my small groups, friends, and I'm very animated and very excited. Like I love you and I chatting because I feel like I can just kind of be myself. When I'm in large groups, I'm a little bit more like a feeling the situation out.
Mm.
And even more so when I'm 13. So like
So
it
you're just
turns out,
like, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it clicked and like I made me very uncomfortable. But he kind of decided, this guy decided that I was going to be his target, I suppose, for the next couple of years. It started with
Mm.
like whipping footballs at me in class and like throwing basketballs at me. But then it kind of progressed to like the worsening stuff. Like we had a swimming pool in our high school, not all ones in Canada do. And after swimming class, we all change. And so like I'm standing there and like I'm naked, about to put my shorts on. He starts whipping me with his towel in front of everybody and starts calling me
Mm.
names. And like everyone starts laughing. And you do that thing where you laugh along because you pretend you're in the joke and we're all friends, but like inside you are just an absolute wreck. That was, yeah, that was the experience I was having. So I'd go home at night. I cried to
Yeah.
pillows often. Like I didn't really
Yeah.
want to tell anyone I was feeling this way. I didn't really know what to do about it. But I remember just always trying to find ways to not feel like this. And how do I bring my like, you don't think of it, you don't think of it as I got to increase my confidence. You think of it as how do I get this guy off my back to get to leave me alone? And nothing is working. Talking to him's not working,
Mhm.
whatever, right? He's got some kind of chip on his shoulder that probably extends past bullying me. Otherwise, this would probably have forgotten about it. But just so like, taking money, $20 here or there, like,
Okay.
pushing me against walls, that kind of thing for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Um, So like eventually
That's
what ends up
that's a lot
happening,
different than what I alluded to earlier, so apologies about that.
yeah.
I didn't
No,
mean
no,
to
that's, but listen,
scoff
you,
it
it's
off,
okay.
but
You wouldn't have known. That dude, it's okay. It's just my experience, right? And I think at some point in time we've all said something to somebody and they felt like they were bullied, but we didn't really necessarily mean it that way. This was very much a case of like, this guy's clearly, taking advantage of me for whatever reason, right? I understand the trigger, but I don't know what was going on,
yeah. And when you're
in his
13,
home
you
life or
you don't
something like
have
that.
that ability to introspect at nearly that level. Like, you probably when you're 13, you can't say, "Oh, he's got a problem with himself that has nothing to do with me. I'm completely external to the situation." But your
Yeah.
your brain is not gonna be able to figure that out when you're 13. Like, you're suffering
Yeah.
both the mental and physical consequences of that.
Yeah. I'm like a people pleaser. As is, and one of the things I've been worked on like my life is like knowing that I'm a people pleaser and that I will give in sometimes, and like that's just like my own thing I'm growing in from, learning how to put boundaries up, all that kind of stuff. But you're right, at 13 you don't really know how to do this stuff, right? You're doing your
Yeah,
best that you can.
well, that's a good point. It's hard enough for adults, like an
Oh,
adult with a
bro,
fully formed brain to like say, "Hey, I gotta have boundaries." Yeah, that's a learning process. 13
it's
years
crazy,
old,
right? We're
that's
always
like
growing.
it's yeah. So, well, sorry to hear about that, and like let's continue on from that. So he's like at this stage where he's pushing you against a wall. He's taking your money. You're feeling like just crap.
Yeah, crap is probably a very good way to sum it up. So I'm just looking for ways to not feel like this. And one of the things I stumble onto is it's taekwondo, and I do it for a number of
Mm,
years. Like I was actually probably doing it before I met him, but I started then volunteering at this taekwondo studio that I'm practicing at, because I need volunteer hours for high school. It's a mandate in Canada. You need to have 40 hours of volunteer work to graduate. So I started doing some volunteering there. And some days there's nothing to do for volunteering. And the owner says, Glenn, why don't you go lift some weights? And I look over in the corner of the gym, right, where he says lift some weights. Like it looks like it hasn't been touched in years. Like there's dust everywhere. There's a couple
mm,
mirrors, right? It's not really a gym per se, but there's some weights. And I just say, okay, let me go try lift some weights and whatever, see what happens, just kill some time. But I start lifting this dumbbell in my hand, doing some curls. And like you sometimes just have these moments in your life where like things just click for you. It was almost like clouds spread, light came down from the heavens and shone on me, like hallelujahs ringing. And I just like find this thing that I find like I just really enjoy doing. I love it. It brings me lots of joy. It's like everything else kind of melts away from you when you're doing that thing that you love so much. And it just happened to be resistance training. I love the way my muscles felt when I was doing it. I love that I could do a little bit more every week. I love that I could progress some. And that's one of the reasons why I love exercise today, aside from the health benefits and the way it makes me look and all that jazz. But it's one of those things where, to the point you made earlier, you can see some progression every workout, no matter what it is that you're doing. Something's going to usually improve. You can usually do something a little bit better. And like that was a way that I learned to develop my confidence. But I just started writing stuff down, like I'd read in the Muscle and Fitness magazine, right? At that time, there's no YouTube, there's no
yeah,
Facebook. Like that stuff doesn't exist yet, right? You're just 15 years old. It doesn't. You're still on dial-up internet, right? Like it doesn't.
yeah,
It's not existent. So you read Muscle and Fitness and it says track your workouts. So I'm like, I'll track my workouts, and I start tracking my workouts, and I just built more confidence. And eventually, I got older. I grew more. Sean, this guy moved on to other things, like whatever. He started just leaving me alone more and started whatever, pursuing his own life stuff. It didn't deal with the bullying thing. I dealt with that through my own self-exploration, but all this stuff. And the reason usually when I tell this story, I preamble it with all this other stuff is because I wouldn't have found exercise when I did and how I did if I didn't end up getting bullied and I didn't end up to where I was and I didn't end up feeling that way. And I'm super glad I did, because also now I have just like thicker skin. I can take more. I'm a little bit more calloused from like an emotional perspective where I can just deal with adversity a little bit more. So I'm really happy I had that experience. And it's brought me to resistance training. And then I, got a kinesiology from York University, which is a study of human body and human movement. I did a bunch of my own studying, trained athletes for a while, realized there's really not a lot of money to be made in athletes, started training the lay person, realizing that a lot of, like we've been discussing, gaining muscle and losing body fat it's very well established how to do that. Most people, if that's their goal, don't necessarily need a personal trainer to walk them through exercise every session to do that. they just need to understand how to get things set up and track and manage it, then they're kind of good to go on their own. So I started moving into like, how do I solve complex problems of like people have pain and movement, where like physiotherapy, massage, chiro, PT, AT, all that other stuff's not working. They've got no other choices left. Well, how can exercise help them? And I kind of started getting really good at that. So now my career is helping people like, gain muscle. I don't really do body composition aesthetics, but what I do is I've got like systems of ways and understanding of the human body such that we can figure out how to help these pains that you have, whether you've got a bunch of herniated discs or shoulder replacements or tendonitis or name your complex injury, or how can we get you moving and feeling better so you're got more mobility, you've got more strength, and just feel confident the way you move. That's kind of like what I do really now and specialize and focus on.
When we spoke before, you did mention, so now it sounds like you don't do this anymore, and maybe you still do, but when we spoke before, it sounded like you did do a little bit of bodybuilding, and you went in that route. I remember talking about visible abs. So one of my goals for this year has been to get down to visible abs. I don't know if I'm going to maintain it, but it is one of those things that, like, I've never seen my abs in my life, and I want to see them at least once. And, then who knows? We'll take it from there. But you were saying that I think you said you got down to 6% body fat before.
Oh no, I didn't get down. I don't think I got down to 6%. People do get down to 6. I may have got down to 9%.
Okay.
Which is when you look at like depending on your body type and how you hold body fat. On me, 9% looked really, really lean. Like I had like veins up to my abs, right? I had
Mhm.
like the well-defined six pack. You could see like my serratus anterior, which is that muscle off the rib cage. I looked good at
Mhm.
9%. Other people look even better. Some people look a little bit different. I look good at 9%. People I think sometimes misunderstand how they're going to look at certain body fat percentages. But yeah, I did get pretty low for a show. It was a terrible experience. I would never do it again because of like the kind of toll it takes on the body. But I did get there at one point. Yeah, I did like one. I think they call it a physique show when you don't
Mhm.
get super muscular. I think it was a physique show. You had shorts on and like swim shorts on, and like they more or less looking at your upper half.
Okay. What is that experience? Why do you say it was terrible?
Um, how do I articulate this here? Yeah, I think you alluded to this earlier. The leaner you did, yeah, the leaner you get, the less body fat you have, the more your body starts making everything else harder to lose body fat, right? Like you get lean where to the point where like you're watching television and there's a show on that you don't care for, but the remote is 10 feet away and you're already feeling so tired and so lazy because you've been in such a deficit for so long and you're so low body fat that you're like, I'm not going to change the channel. I'm just going to watch whatever, The
Mhm.
Housewives of California, whatever's on, right? Like you get to that point where like, screw it, right? And so you get to a body fat percentage where like you're just miserable. And some
Mhm.
people who have like great genetics to be lean and muscular and strong are kind of like good with that. And we usually call them professional athletes, right? Like those are the people that can withstand the like no, like you said, the no pain, no gain, extreme discipline, get to that level where they're just burning so much energy during the day. They can eat a ton of food and genetically they just have a lower set point. And we've seen people where they have like, they work out all the time, but they always seem to be a little fluffy, right?
Mhm.
So like I did this show and like I was dieting down to like 1600 calories, 1500 calories, super ripped, like miserable, like
Yeah.
brain fog, terrible at my job. Got to the
Yeah.
point where the calorie deficit was so big for so long that I was sleeping like 4 hours a night because I just couldn't get to sleep and stay asleep. I looked great, but felt like human garbage, right? Like
Isn't that kind of funny?
never again, bro.
Look
And
look you look great, but don't feel great.
yeah, and but sometimes you got to get to that spot to know what you're
Yeah.
willing to have your life look like. So I remember getting the show that day, and I looked at the guys I was with, and like I clearly was not. I was clearly like there was like 6 guys in my category. One guy really didn't look like he did do anything, but kudos to him for just still show up and go on stage, just like a guy at the beach.
Mhm.
But props from going on stage. And it's like we go on stage and they're there ranking us and like, you've just to learn how to pose and all that jazz. I had no idea how
Mhm.
to pose. Like I did a little practicing, but like, this is more for fun than it is like trying to make a good go of being like a competitor. So like I don't think I looked that great. Um Anyways, you go out, you do that, you leave, and then they do announce the winners in the afternoon. and they're announcing all the places, and they say 5th place this guy, 4th place this guy. And I'm like, this is fucking crazy. I got 3rd place in my first show. They announce some other guy. They say 2nd place, right? Some other guy. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, holy fuck, I came 1st place. And I could hear my buddies like yelling in the background, Glenn came 1st. That's wild. Like no one thought that was possible. So like they say 1st place, Glen Owen. Like the guy lifts my hand in the air, gives me my medal around my neck. Everyone starts
That's
clapping.
awesome.
And then, yeah, you think so. And then the judges say, oh, there was a scoring error. Give all the medals back. The computers made a mistake. I came 5th. I didn't come 1st. I came like last in the placing. So then they give the medals. They give all the medals back. I'm laughing about it because I know how I look. I know I don't look like these guys. And like I'm laughing about it, the guys who run the show are like, "You're being a good sport." We know the judges are talking about computer error, but I ended up coming like this. Is all I have the video somewhere. I came like 1st place, and they took it away, and they came 5th.
Oh man.
But yeah, it was a funny moment at the time. But the whole experience, I just like made me feel like I never want to do this again. And then we had talked about in our pre-show, I had gained, I think 25, 30 pounds back. I went from 165 all the way up to like 190, 195, something like that. I went from like 9% body fat all the way up to 18 or 19. Like it was brutal, right? Like I was like soft. I was eating like a tub of ice cream every day, eating pizza multiple times a week, like buying and eating trays of brownies. Like the rebound from that is absolutely nuts. It was crazy.
You had to make up for lost time.
I mean, you know what? Like in jest and funny, 100%. Like the truth is that when you don't do things in the right way, slowly, progressively, and you just crash and rush into things, you'll have rebound effects, right? One of the things that happens when you do things the way that you're doing, at a slower pace, is you end up building habits and identity around what it is that you're doing. Right. One of the things that I got to do as a part of a podcast that I used to host, Minds on Muscles, I got to interview someone who's a sports scientist with a focus on psychology. And one of the things that she was telling us about, I think Dr. Mel Davis, one of the things that she was telling us was that the people that are the most sustainable with their health, both like in the gym when it comes to like either aesthetics or healthy eating or body image, whatever it is along with their habitual changes, is over time, they actually shift their identity. She said that people who like see themselves as unsuccessful, overweight, and fat, and they feel like that's who they are at a deep subconscious level, when they're done their cut or they're done their diet phase, they just go back to the way they were before and they put all the weight back on. But if they really have spent time to build their identity out along with their habits, what ends up happening is they see themselves as a healthy eater. They see themselves as a consistent exerciser. They see themselves as someone who sleeps well, and that becomes who they are. So even if they, quote unquote, try to sabotage themselves, they just end up going back to those new healthy habits anyways, because it's in line with their identity. So one of the things that ends up happening when you do things slowly and you work on yourself, in addition to working on the actions you take, you end up making all this stuff sustainable for the long term.
Yeah, that key word sustainable has been important for me since I've tried many different things, and it's the bigger thing for me is okay. And I want to get your thoughts on bulking versus cutting. Like I never did that, and I know that's a very popular cycle. I don't really understand it that well, but I know I cannot do cutting. I know that 100%. Because that's where you go on an extreme calorie deficit. You're just talking about 1,500 calories a day. That's that would I wouldn't be able to do that. And all the symptoms you described back then, I can't function with all that. Right. So this is things like I wouldn't be able to sleep, which means that I wouldn't be able to perform at my job. I get that brain fog. I get headaches. I get these crazy hunger pangs, and it's just like I feel miserable for half a day, much less a full day, much less a week. Like I can't do that. I absolutely cannot. It's not within the realm of my of my reality that I could do any sort of extreme deficit cut. So I know I cannot do cutting. And then I hear about bulking, but then I also hear like I have friends who tried bulking, and they almost always come back and say, Yeah, I kind of fucked that up. I put on like 20 pounds of fat, and I'm like,
Yeah.
like it's like there's this. I understand this is like the way a lot of people will cycle through a muscle building and then decreasing their body fat, but I don't know how I don't know anyone who's like personally who's done that. But I think in the acting world, for example, when people,
Mhm.
especially when guys want to put on muscle for like a superhero movie, they'll do this cycle, which like it really doesn't seem something that's reasonable for me. So that I
Mhm.
mean the reason I'm doing like the body recomposition thing, which is I'm trying to cut weight and put on muscle at the same time, is because that is for me long-term sustainable even if it's slower.
Mhm. Yeah, so there's a bunch of things we can unpack here. So I think from the first perspective here, like words are important, and it's like, what does the nomenclature really mean? So there are some people will use the term cutting just to
Hmm.
reframe at to a body fat losing stage, whether the deficit is high and it's aggressive, or whether that's going to be like a little bit more slower, longer duration, right?
Mm,
Other people typically use bulk as like I'm just going to try to gain weight and I'm not really paying that much attention to my nutrition other than I know I'm eating in a pretty big surplus, right? And then
mhm,
you have people that might refer to as just like a hypertrophy phase where they're paying attention to the nutrition and they're only eating 300 or 400 calories more per day, which is really kind of what seems like the research points to as like what you need to do in order to gain a little bit more muscle. You could probably like closer to 250 or 300 depending on how tall and how big you are,
mhm.
right? If you're
Yeah. By the
165
way, Glenn,
pounds, you don't need,
I just want to point out this is super helpful because even me who's researched this, I'm not even using the terms correctly. And now if we think about like what is out there in the general public, this is part of the reason there's all this confusion. So I'm really happy to hear that you're like breaking down this terminology because you can't solve the problem if you can't even define it properly. So yeah, okay. Bulking and
yeah.
cutting is not just putting on weight or losing weight. It's a lot more to that. So thank you and like continue with helping me out with these things.
Yeah, and I'll just and by the way, awesome, like love it, and I'm happy to. And it's also like which circles are you in, and what are people using? This is like the hard thing. I think this is like the one of the issues with like it's a net good thing, but when everything's democratized and everyone can have a platform and people just say what they want to, people use whatever words that they want, right? This I'm telling you right now from like consuming a lot of different stuff where things typically tend to fall with these words, but you might have people use them differently. So by all means, what I'm saying right now isn't gospel in terms of terms, right? But you can gain muscle pretty well at only like a 250, 300 calorie surplus per day. You don't have to do a quote unquote bulk. And in fact, I would say for the most part, it's kind of outdated to do these dirty bulks because why would you
Mm,
want to go and try to go through half a year of gaining muscle and gain 10 or 15 pounds of body fat when maybe you'll have to gain like 3 or 4, and then it's a lot smaller of a cycle to put that off afterwards if you then want to go lose some body fat, right? I think
mhm,
if people are really looking at this from a very rational, logical, call it a science based perspective, what you'll see is that the advocacy is to do cycles where I know I'm going to try to do hypertrophy for 12, 16 weeks, half a year, a year. I'm going to do it intelligently where I'm going to like manage my food intake. So I'm only eating a small surplus, but enough to add some muscle, right? And then do that and gain 3, 4, 5 pounds of muscle over a half a year, whatever, wherever you're at in your journey. And then spend some time doing a dedicated fat loss phase where then I'm just try to lose a pound, maybe 2 pounds a week, depending on how big I am, and then do that for a dedicated amount of time. And then cycle back between those two things and maybe add some maintenance in there for when you just want to enjoy a little bit more food, but not have to be so rigorous about counting. There's different ways you can do this. But the idea that you're supposed to do like a deep cut where you're just trying to get shredded and then do a dirty bulk where you're just trying to add a whole bunch more weight, that just kind of seems like lost time and energy and resources in the big picture. Because then you got to just do way more fat, less off afterwards. And like you're going to feel way crappier eating all that other food and adding more all that body fat, kind of unnecessary, right? Kind of
mhm,
unnecessary. Here's kind of like the net benefit and positive is that from a psychological perspective, I, I mean, personally, I'm not a huge fan of motivation and discipline. I think
mm,
that there are some people that do great with discipline. I have some clients who are like amazingly disciplined. I'm not a very disciplined person. I'm not.
mhm,
I need things that like are systematized that I can follow so that I don't have to worry about discipline. I just have to worry about working the system, right? If I want to lose body fat, I don't keep this shit at home that I'm going to eat, right?
Yeah.
Last
Yeah.
night, like I'm not trying to change my body composition very much right now. I made brownies last night, made too many brownies, had 1 or 2 extra. I'm like, I can't have these brownies anymore. I'm going to give them to my neighbor.
Are we talking
you know what
Canadian
I mean?
brownies or Californian brownies?
I don't know. Well, if California brownies are the ones that make you think funny, not those ones. I can't. Those ones, I have a very low tolerance to the California brownies. I will think aliens are out to get me and that the world is ending and that everyone hates me. That's how my psychosis goes.
That might be, that might be closer to reality. We never know.
Bro, I had edibles one time like that. And those are literally the things that I thought. I cried into a pillow for 5 hours. I'm never doing that again. I'm very like sensitive, emotional person when we get down to the core of it. Yeah. So, I mean, like, I forget where I was. Oh, right. Here we go. Motivation and discipline are like 2 things that a lot of people think they have way more of that they don't. Most people are going to do way better with like systems and understanding obstacles. And we'll talk about a little that later if we end up going to like the drive method and all that stuff for like the system for exercise that I use. But short of the long right now is people don't do very well with like motivation and discipline. The best thing to do is like have a system to work around that, which is really where the science-based lifting comes into play. We know that most people need to see some kind of short-term gains or progress when they start a new endeavor, a new program, right? Program/system. So someone like you might do really great on like a minimal deficit where they can lose 1 pound, maybe 2 pounds per month, and they're good at that. A lot of other people have a much harder time with that. I'd be one of them. If I'm going to actually go through and do like a fat loss phase, I'm going to do that where like my deficit's going to be around 600 calories, 700 calories a day, maybe up to 800, or I lose 1 pound, pound and a half per week. And I might do that for 4 weeks so that I lose, call it 4 to 6 pounds of body fat. I need to have those wins every week where I see those changes. Otherwise, I'm not going to be very well motivated or disciplined staying in that program. I need to see that stuff. Most people need to do that, right? If you see a lot of people who promote programs for fat loss, what they often start with is like a 3-day cleanse where people don't eat very much for 3 days and try to do like a water fast, or they'll do like only vegetables or something like that. You know, part of that is because they'll tell you like it's good to just not have any sugar in your system and all that jazz. And it's true. If you don't have sugar for 3 days, the first day sucks. The second day is much better. The third day for most people, they feel way better about it. But then on top of that, if you have very minimal calories in terms of just water to begin with, or just vegetables, which is like 500 or 600 calories, all of a sudden, over 3 days, you've lost 1 pound or 2 of body fat, but then a bunch of water. And all of a sudden, you've got a huge quick win under your belt. You measure yourself. You're like, oh, I've already lost 4 pounds. Great progress. Let me now get back into the rest of this, right? So people need to have those small wins, which is very often why people starting on a deficit where they'll lose like 1 pound a week is usually a better place to start. They need those wins. Other people, it's like similar with hypertrophy where they need to be focused on that so that they can start seeing the repetitions and the weights go up a little quicker. Otherwise, they're like, why am I not gaining as quickly? I don't like this. It's hard for them to stay on a program. They start program hopping too much, right? They get bored. I'm not seeing progress. So most people usually need a dedicated either, no, I'm going to be losing some body fat. I'm going to see some wins quickly, getting some muscle. I'm going to see some wins quickly, or they know I'm in maintenance right now. I'm not expecting to see a change. So I'm not going to be disappointed when things don't move as fast as I want to. I'm just going to go enjoy Cuba for a week, or I'm just going to enjoy my summer for a month. I'm not going to be too worried how my weight fluctuates too much, right? So when we talk about, how does all this stuff kind of fit together, most people are going to fall into one of those categories where they're going to want to have a very specific goal. That's the first thing I want to say on that. The second thing I want to say before you ask too many questions is that your body does not do a good job adapting to too many different physical stimuluses at one time. So it's very hard to get great at running a marathon and building a ton of muscle at one time. And intuitively, we kind of know that, right? We intuitively can kind of be like, yeah, I can't really see those two things going together quite well. Because when you look at what's necessary, learning to run a marathon requires vast amounts of catabolism and breaking down of glycogen and stress on the tissues over your course of your runs, whether you're doing like 5, 10, 20, 30 kilometers, right? That takes a lot of catabolism in the body. Your body's like, I'm constantly breaking down, right, nutrients in order to get better at running long distances. Resistance training is a little bit different where we're not doing long bouts of stress, right? It's not a lot of impact on my joints. It's really kind of like, I'm going to do 45 minutes or an hour of lifting weights a day, I'm not even stretching at the same joints all the time. And the body's very much like, okay, like this stress is a thing where like the muscles are getting transiently weaker. There's a lot of mechanical tension right now. We better just add muscle, right? And it tends to be far more of an anabolic thing because there's way less time spent in catabolism, right? Right? You're going to be doing way less of the catabolic stuff on each of your joints than if you're running. So the body then is just like, I'm just going to add muscle, and that's my only focus right now. If you try to do too much stuff at one time, like I'm going to try to add muscle while decreasing body fat, those things are counterintuitive because your body's like, well, I need nutrients to
Yeah.
build new tissue, but I'm not really getting enough nutrients because I'm not getting enough calories in here. I can only really build so much muscle right now because I got to be really worried about this body fat thing going down. And your body is just kind of like, okay, I'm going to do like both of these things, I guess, at the same time, but neither of them really, really well. Most people will see way better progress over the course of a year by spending, let's say, like 6 to 8 months either trying to add muscle and then like 6 to 8 months then trying to lose body fat. And what ends up happening is the net positive by chasing like one goal at a time tends to be much greater, right? At the end of the day, though, the most important thing is like, what do you want to do? What's feasible for you? And if you're the kind of person where you're like, you know what, I'm happy making smaller muscle gains, but seeing my body fat go down a little bit slower, but that's happy and I can sustain that and it feels good for me, power to you. Get after it, my brother. But a lot of people just aren't going to fall into those categories. And it turns out the research would show that it's just probably not as quote unquote efficient as doing one than the other. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. So we're talking in terms of like say for a bulk, jumping on
Yeah.
like a 200 to 300 calorie surplus, we're getting all the other macros like the nutrients, the protein, all that stuff. You'll be putting on you're allowing your body to focus on one thing at a time, which is to say, let me increase my muscles.
Yeah. I mean,
And
like, think about
then
it this way, right? If you in your life have like 5 different projects you're trying to focus on, how well
Mhm.
does each one of those projects really go? Right?
Yeah.
Like, kind of not that great. But like, if you're focusing on like one major thing at a time, you need to put all your intention and energy to that from a mental perspective, that thing tends to go pretty quickly, which is great, right? Your body's the same thing, just with like its resources of like time, like calories, energy, and like recovery. You have only so much recovery capacity. What's your
Mhm.
body going to recover from? Is it going to recover better? Is it going to end up recovering better from like cardio, or do you want to recover better from lifting weights? Like, what are we going to be doing here?
Mhm. So, well, let me ask you, what would be and what would you say is like the difference between that sort of bulk and what you should do differently during the cut phase?
Yeah, I mean,
Because
I don't think there's
you kind
really.
of identified correctly what my impression was, which was aggressive, but I don't think that's the correct. I don't think that's well. It sounds like there's multiple ways to think about it, and what is the best way? I don't know.
So again, it depends on depends on what you're doing. If you're trying to get like show lean, like super
Mhm.
super lean, like you kind of got to focus on that thing exclusively, right? At some point, your body's going to be like, oh, this deficit's not cutting anymore, right? Um, if the question is, so is the question like how do we manage multiple goals, or the question is, sorry, could you rephrase the question for me again? I apologize.
Yeah. So, well, let me kind of ask it from a little bit higher level. What is a sustainable bulk program? And then what
Mm,
is a follow-up sustainable cut program?
right. So coming back to first principles then, right? We look at this from a physiological perspective. The question is really, what can our body tolerate and how do we work within those toleration parameters, right? So what's
Mhm,
going to dictate our tolerance during a cut? Well, we know it's going to be like how many nutrients are we taking in that allow us to sustainably continue to exercise at a high enough level to maintain the muscle on our body while still losing body fat. At some point, depending on how big the deficit is that you're
mhm.
working in, you're just not going to be recovering from your exercise as well, right? You may
So,
be able
and
to get
what's a
fit.
reasonable deficit?
Well, that's going to depend on who you are. If you're like a 120-pound female versus like a 250-pound bodybuilder, your deficit capacity is going to be way different, right? Like
Mm,
what you can possibly be in is going to be like way different, right? Depending on who you are, you might look at like cutting like 10, 15, 20% of your calories. So if you're like 120-pound female and maybe your metabolic rate is going to be like 1,700 calories a day, like if you're fairly active and you're lucky, right? Or maybe a little higher, you may only be able to take off like 300 calories a day, 400 calories a day. And that actually might be for a fat loss phase. You try to take off 800 calories for someone like that and try to lose like 1.5 pounds of body weight per week or 1 pound of body weight, that's just going to be like no energy feeling zonked, right? Like that's too aggressive, right? But for me, I could do 800 calories a day, 700 calories a day and sustain that for a month, no problem, because I'm close to like 180. Like that's okay for me, right? That difference is all right. So it kind of depends on who you are. Most people are going to feel probably like good at a dedicated fat loss phase, probably around like 20-ish%, give or take 5 or 10%, depending on who they are, right? And then it's all about like, what can you recover from in the gym, right? If you can do 15 sets right now at your deficit, you might find that amount of sets drops down to like 8 to 10 because you just can't recover from any more than that. But like good news, the amount of sets that it takes to maintain muscle is far less than it takes to grow it. Like maintenance sets, I think what the research is looking, it seems to point at right now on average is if you're in a maintenance mode and you're eating maintenance calories, assuming you get enough protein, you can get away with doing 4 or 5 sets per body part week and maintain your muscle mass. You're probably not going to burn a ton of extra energy, but it saves you from having to go to the gym a whole bunch, right? If you're like at a phase where like you're having kids and it's like super crazy and busy, you only get to the gym like twice a week for 40 minutes. That's all you have energy for. If you get like, 2 or 3 sets of like each of your exercises, like 2 or 3 sets of pushing, 2 or 3 sets of pulling, 2 or 3 sets of like a big compound leg exercise and get whatever like knee extensions, knee curls, shoulder, whatever else you want to get in there, you'll probably maintain your muscle just fine, right? Really, it kind of depends on where you're at, right? But maintaining at a maintenance calories, 4 or 5 sets per week. But the question is not what is going to be like maintenance. The goal is like what's optimal. At this point in time, it kind of depends on how well does your body recover from whatever deficit you're in. You can still push it within those realms, but you just got to pay attention to your body, right? What's going to end up happening is, let's say you're doing 5 sets of like a chest press in a workout, and let's say you're leaving like 2 repetitions in the bank, right? You may get like 15 reps for your first set, maybe 15 for your second, but then you might get 13 for your next set, 12 for your next set, and then like you go right down to 8 because your body just toasted at that point. You probably have done 1 more set than you probably ought to have that day, because when you start getting down 8 repetitions, you're starting to get to like your junk volume. You're not really training stimulus at that point. You're not close enough to failure, right? As a general metric. So like the short of the long here, and I apologize if I'm being verbose, is your deficit is going to dictate what you can recover from. And ultimately you're trying to push yourselves within what you can recover from in your workouts. So there's no like set number. You just kind of got to figure out how much am I dropping off now between each of my sets. And once you start dropping off 3, 4, 5 extra repetitions, you probably should start cutting that exercise at that point in time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wonder what your thoughts are on peptides and other substances that have been making their way through all this kind of stuff, because it's funny when it's funny because they get sold on very different types of targets. So for example, there'll be some set of peptides that are for recovery. There's some set of peptides for fat loss. And as I said earlier, I have not seen any reasonable substances that actually increase fat burn outside of, just burning more calories and taking less calories in. But I know it has become popular, and there's an open question of safety or not, right? Like this is somewhat related to those PEDs, performance enhancing drugs.
I don't know enough about it, to be honest with you. I haven't done a lot of research on it. I won't say anything on the peptides, and I'll have to graciously bow out of that one, because I know what I know and I know what I don't know, and I know I don't know about that. What I can say is that the supplement market in general, like billions and billions of dollars, a lot of that stuff doesn't work or doesn't even move the needle unless you're doing all the other stuff to begin with, right? Unless you're like sleep is the best anabolic aid that you have. the amount of deficit in your testosterone when you don't sleep well that affects your muscle building as like a male is crazy, right? The difference between getting 6 hours of sleep a night and 8 hours of sleep is one of the best anabolic aids that you'll have. Outside of that, the best research supplements that have performance impacts are caffeine and creatine, fish oil for like recovery and general health, and a multivitamin for recovery and general health. And then other things come into play after that. If you're not getting a lot of vitamin D and you're deficient in that, it affects your immune system, which is your recovery system largely. And so if you're low vitamin D, probably should be supplementing with that. Outside of those supplements, everything else is just an add-on. If you're getting 6 hours of sleep, peptides, and all that other stuff ain't going to do jack shit for you. So it's largely nice marketing and all that jazz. But if you're not doing the basics right, which I know is a boring answer for most people, wah, too bad, so sad. It's the truth. It doesn't matter what you do with all that other stuff. So like, good luck, you know?
Yeah. Well, all the things you mentioned is over the counter, has been around for many years, if not thousands of years, right? Like fish oil
Well,
and it has been around for
it's well
1,000 of years.
Yeah, I mean, like it's like super well established. Like people
Yeah.
take creatine. It's like from a research perspective, the science says they'll gain muscle quicker because it helps restore your creatine phosphate, which is your fast energy system, right? Your creatine phosphate system, and that allows you to get 1 or 2 extra repetitions. You can do 1 or 2 extra repetitions. You challenge your muscles that much more. You challenge your muscles that much more. They grow more, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense, right? Everything else downstream, you're not getting enough of the nutrients that you need that are downstream of like facilitating recovery. You're not going to recover as quickly. You're going to not grow as much muscle. Fish oil, great for your immune system, great for your skin, like great for your brain, great for health. All this other stuff, I'm like, yeah, I mean, you take a peptide. Let's say there's a peptide that is supposed to help your muscle recover. Great. What if you just got the sleep that you're not getting and your testosterone jumps up a bunch of points and now everything in your body is that much more anabolic and you're recovering that much better instead of having to spend like hundreds of extra dollars on peptides? You know what I mean? Like it really comes down to the basics.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, the first principles at the beginning, right? Like put your muscles under tension, have a reasonable calorie intake based off of where you're at, your burn rate, and what your goals are. And yeah, the nutrition and sleep, as you mentioned at the
It's
end.
not sexy.
Yeah. Well, it's it's the when the answers are not sexy, I always see these as positive things, because then you know that you have something reliable and established, and we can go on. But it does. You're right. It doesn't sell, right? Like if you're scrolling on Instagram, the thing that sells is like mushroom infused caffeine or mushroom infused coffee, and you're like, this is weird, but people are buying it because it's new, it's innovative, it's exciting. Maybe this is the groundbreaking, the breakthrough that's going to make it easy for everything else. But no, I mean, getting your hours for sleep, hitting the gym, and eating well, these are not easy. The phrase that I've heard in related topics is it's simple but not easy. But I want to jump into one last thing, and we can spend I've got plenty of time, so we could spend time on it, which is the drive method. So you talk about the clients that you've worked with. You've kind of worked with a range of clients, and you have a sense of what works for most people, and you have some ways to help people go through it. And I have a feeling that we're going to spend some more time getting into the systematizing that you talked about earlier. And one thing I will mention is I rarely buy junk food. And like, I understand you can have junk food once in a while and it's fine, but my problem is just as your problem, which is if it's at home, I'm going to eat it. And like, I cannot moderate myself. I can stop myself from buying it, but once I have it at home, I cannot stop myself from eating it. So it's like, I have to resolve the issue at the source. And like, that's part of my system. But yeah, I want to hear more about what you got going on there.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I'll try to be not like super verbose about it, but
we have time, Glenn. Be as verbose as you want.
Verbose I want.
Make up new words. Use long words. Make up words. Over sentence your sentences.
I will over sentence all my sentences. So, I like systems, and I always love the line that like systems stands for save yourself some time, energy, and money. That is always one of my favorite systems. I know, right? Yeah, do the
Say
math.
it again.
Save yourself some time. System stands for S, save, Y, your, S, self, TM, time, energy, and money.
Okay.
That's what system
Favor
stands for. I
self.
really like that's like one of my favorite phrases.
Yeah.
And I think that as human beings, we over invest in our discipline and our motivation, and we underinvest in just figuring out a system to make things work and happen. And so I've been working and doing personal training for like, I think 15-ish years now, exercising for most of my life at this point, and just working with my clients who just decide to put together like a system for like, how do I work with people? And my system is more towards people who want to move and have better mobility, less pain, and more quality of life and confidence. I work with a lot of people where they see their parents or they've seen their grandparents or family members just like suffer with injury and a lack of independence and need people to rely on them when they're older, and they don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Like when we're young, like you and I, like, 30s and 40s, don't think about that stuff as much, but we've all got family members or people that are close where we've seen them age and we're like, I don't want to age like that. And this is the system that I developed to help people manage that, so to speak. So drive is, discover, roadmap, and then there's invigorate, vitalize, and evaluate. And it's just like the steps I take people through my system in order to help them improve their health. The overarching concept that I work off of is that, if we want to get to a specific destination, whether it's I want to be a certain body fat and have a certain amount of muscle, or it's I want to move with more mobility, strength, and confidence, the framework is very, very similar, but what we do to get there is different, right? If we want to get to a certain place, we have to have a well-defined destination. We have to know where we're starting, and then we have to have like a roadmap in order to get there, right? And so the way I start working with all my people is I say, like, let's discover really what you want. If we're looking at like the ideal physique, we're like, what do you want your body to look like, right? In your case, if you came to me and said, Glenn, help me with my physique, I'd say, like, what do you want your body to look like? How much you want to weigh? What are maybe some things you want to be able to do with your body? What are some things that you're concerned about? What's going to get in the way from you succeeding? What do you think you're really, really good at? What are your everyday superpowers? Like, is there a certain amount of muscle you're thinking about? Like, are there pictures of people that you want to look like? What body parts are important to you? We'd collect a bunch of information about what does that look like for you to reach your end physique goal, right?
Who's the most common photo of a body type that you get from men and
Oh,
from
I don't
women?
get any of that because I don't do aesthetics. I'm just using that as an example to make kind of
Okay.
relatable maybe to you and audience members, right?
Yeah.
But most people are going to pick their favorite either like movie star, right? Or I've seen women pick their favorite like influencer or something like that. Those are things that I've heard people in like friendship circles talk about, so to speak, right? If it comes to like an actual health perspective, it's like for the clients I have, it's like, what do you want to be able to do in like 10, 20, 30 years from now? Does it look like you want to play golf? Do you want to keep going to the gym? Do you want to go on hikes? Do you want to be able to travel, going up and down stairs, do dishes, like be able to pick your spouse up off the floor if something happens to them, like live independently? What does that actually look like? Because unless you actually have a very crystal clear idea of what it is that you want the end result to be, then we can't really create a plan to get there, right? The other thing that it does, I wonder if I have the book here. I don't think I have it in the library right now. There's a book from the 60s, I think it's called, by a guy named Maxwell Maltz. I think it's called Psycho-Cybernetics, which was the speak of the time. But it's all about how do you change your subconscious thinking, right? Because this book was written by a surgeon who would do surgery on people. And after they did like cosmetic surgery, some people would love the way they look and they had a new outlook on life. Other people, they'd get like cosmetic surgery done and they would still feel like no change. They'd still feel however they felt before and no emotional change. He's like, well, what's the difference here? Like, what's going on in people's brains? And anyways, he wrote this book on how do you kind of change the way you think. And if you could just change the way you think on a subconscious level, you just change all your habits. You just change your way of being. Success becomes automatic, right? Discipline and motivation is great to force stuff through, but unless things in behavior change become automatic, we can't really sustain that over the long term, right? That's why habits are so important. Your sense of self and your identity is so important. Your worldview is so important because that's what essentially makes things automatic, right? I stay at the body fat and muscle amount that I have right now because going to the gym and eating healthy is just what I do. If you took me away for a week and then brought me back, I'd just go back to doing the same things again because that's the way I live my life. That's who I am subconsciously. It's the way my brain is wired at this point. And so the reason I'm saying all this stuff is that if we have a really good crystal clear picture of where we want to be in the end, and we've got a really good target, that also sets us our subconscious to start finding more ways to get to that target, right? Like a homing missile trying to hit a specific target. If you know what that target is, even if your coordinates aren't right now and you go off course, eventually you'll get back to where you need to go, right? So I really focus on the end goal when I start working with people, aesthetics or physical health. And then once you really know where you want to go, you really kind of try to take a stock of where am I at right now. So from an aesthetic perspective, it may be what's my current body fat percentage? What's my current muscle percentage? What kind of foods am I eating right now? How much am I eating? Measuring all the different stuff that we talked about earlier, right? Taking stock of if I want to change some stuff, what kind of resources do I have? Can I go to the gym 3 times a week, 4 times a week, twice a week, once a week, every day, multiple times a day? How's my sleep? How's my whatever? When I work with people and I look at their body, I'm more looking at what's their posture, what's their range of motion. I do collect some like body weight metrics that what I talked about. I collect muscle girth measurements to figure out if they have more muscle on one side versus the other. I do a bunch of muscle testing to see if their joints are stable. I try to get a real crystal clear picture of what's working well in their body and what's not. What's their injury history, right? What's their daily life like? All this, like I've conservatively probably well over 2,000 metrics I look at when I first start working with people, right? You know to click the right information, you get all those different things. And so once now we know where we're at, what's going on, and we know where we want to go, what the end goal looks like, it becomes way easier to then map out a roadmap to get there, right? You had just said this thing, like, I know if I have junk food in my house, I'm going to eat it. Great. You've identified an obstacle. What system do we put in place to remove that obstacle? We just don't have the junk food in the house. So when we get the cravings at 7 p.m. at night, it's carrots, right? And yogurt or whatever, versus I'm going to go grab like a Reese's Pieces. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's an aesthetic kind of obstacle. My people are dealing with like kids, injuries and discomfort, whatever you want to name. We're just trying to identify all these obstacles. So we are trying to figure out along the way, now what do we put in place so these obstacles are no longer obstacles, right? The reason I love this is because instead of having to rely on motivation and discipline, like I'm just not going to eat the Reese's Pieces, I'm just not going to eat the Reese's Pieces, no longer a problem. It just gets done, right? Going to the gym, for example, some people, they work outside the house, they got to go home, get their gym stuff, then go. They get home, it's been a long day, boss pissed them off, fuck it, I'm not going to the gym anymore, right? Okay, just keep your gym stuff in your car all the time and go to a gym that's on your way home. So you remove the potential of you not going to the gym by having yourself already set to go. You know what I mean? So we're just trying to I'll figure all that stuff out. And that's really the D and the drive method, discover. We're just trying to collect as much data as we can, right? Does it make sense so far? Can I keep popping off? You got any questions or anything you want to add?
Oh, it makes sense so far. So we got discover, we got roadmap.
Yeah, we'll get there. So let's go to roadmap right now, right?
Okay. Oh, so this is roadmap from roadmap. Okay.
Yeah. So now we're going to roadmap, right? So okay. Roadmap, I kind of started getting into it within the obstacles piece, which is like, what do you put in place to make sure you get to your goal? Mm-hmm. For aesthetic stuff, it's going to kind of be like, what's your plan, right? I'm going to go to the gym 4 days a week, upper body push, here are my exercises, sets, reps, here's how I'm going to progress it, whatever, right? For the clients that I work with, and in the book, it's like, how are you going to start achieving that stuff that you want to do? If you still want to be able to hike when you're older, or you want to deal with your knee pain, what kind of exercise or things do you have to start doing, right? When you deal with pain and discomfort and instability, it's a little bit more complex. And it's a little bit more nuanced. I talk about in the book how you might achieve that. Sometimes getting a professional is helpful for that. I encourage anyone that's like, if they do buy the book in the future, invest in a trainer that's near you, at least to collect some data to figure out how to implement some of this stuff. Even if you don't work with them all the time, just get you directionally correct. But like for when I work with people, it's like what things are unstable and how do we create exercise that's going to work for you right now? This is the complexity piece. It's a little harder to navigate sometimes, but you try and you focus enough and you try some different things. Even if you do it on your own, you'll find some stuff that works for you. Mm-hmm. But the roadmap piece is just kind of like the plan that we put together. Here's what we're going to do at this point in time. Here's what we're going to do in the later points in times. Here are all the things that we got to tick off in our milestones along the way. If it's an aesthetic thing, it's going to maybe it's kind of like on Sundays, I food prep. right? Right before you and I talked, I went grocery shopping. My wife just cleaned all the vegetables. I'm going to go cook a bunch of steaks and chicken and make a bunch of peppers, and we're going to be set for the week. That's our kind of Sunday ritual. Sometimes we do it like on a Monday, or we'll do a little bit piecemeal, but like usually if we're home together on a Sunday, right, we're just going to do food prep. And that's a part of our roadmap for our healthy nutrition. Most people that want to eat healthy, that are really successful in the aesthetic thing, they do the same thing. They got a day where they make a bunch of food, so that instead of wondering like, what am I having tonight? Potato chips or chicken breast and broccoli, they're like, chicken breast and broccoli, there's no potato chips. That stuff's already made, right? For my clients and the people that read the book, it's the exact same thing. We're just trying to figure out all the stuff that you need to do so you can just follow it and make action seamless, right? Makes sense so far?
Oh, yeah.
Cool. So the I phase is a little bit different. I phase is Invigorate. One of the things that ends up happening in the human body when there's stress, trauma, or overuse is the body will start shifting work away from those tissues that don't work well, and start shifting it onto the tissues that do work well. So to give you an example, an athlete may get a knee injury, or one of my clients might get a shoulder injury. And even though they're healed over the next 4 to 6 weeks or months or whatever that is, they haven't been using this area as much. Well, what ends up happening when you cast something up? Let's just say a broken arm, right? Few things happen. One thing that ends up happening is you have hypertrophy because you're not using it as much, right? So not hypertrophy, atrophy, right? Right? What do you give to the winner of a muscle loss competition? Atrophy, right? It's a stupid muscle personal training joke. Anyways, forget that. But you cast something up, you get atrophy. So already you're losing the raw horsepower, the raw contractile units.
I just got it, by the way.
Yeah.
It took me a couple of minutes.
Yeah. So you have less hypertrophy, right? You have less muscle all of a sudden. You have atrophy. So you already have lost tissue there. One of the things that ends up happening is you start having de-differentiation of your body's ability to control these muscles. There's a really interesting study where this scientist took a look at the nervous system activity of a monkey's hand, and then he started sewing together the monkey's fingers so that they weren't all articulating together. And what he found is after 6 weeks of having the monkey's fingers sewn together such that, you know, the last 2 fingers, your pinky finger and your 4th digit are tied together, and then your 3rd finger and your pointer finger are tied together and the thumb articulating on its own. He found that once he unsewed it off the monkey still kind of moved in the same way without the stitches on. And that's because in the brain, it reorganized itself to understand there are now 3 digits here instead of 5, which is a really interesting thing. And what that kind of tells us is that your body and your brain will compensate and reorganize the brain around what tissues it has available. So now you apply that to like muscles in a cast or a shoulder replacement or a knee injury, a dislocated shoulder. You all of a sudden have a brain using all your muscles and joints in a different way, right? If you and I, Hugh, were in a dancing competition and we wanted to win the grand prize of a Lamborghini, and let's say you're a really great dancer and I'm a terrible dancer, and I decide to phone it in with a terrible little 2-step and I'm not doing much. And you see how little I'm dancing, and you decide you got to make up. So you dance like crazy and you work really, really hard. After an hour of dancing like that, who's going to be uptight, achy, stressed out, and overused and essentially pissed off?
Yeah, definitely.
It's going to be you. Yeah, because you're working hard. I'm going to be okay, right? So where this is going is that when your body starts compensating around injuries or stress or whatever that is, you start overusing some things, underusing other things. It changes the way you distribute work throughout your body. It changes the way different joints are held. And over time, this causes increased wear and tear like osteoarthritis and pain and discomfort in joints. It can cause tight, achy muscles for the ones that are overworked to make up for the ones that aren't working very well. Why am I saying all of this? It's because you and I already at the age of 30, 40, we have this stuff, but it might not be that stressful or that discomforting right now, or maybe we don't even detect it. But people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, they have a lifetime of this stuff built up. So the Invigorate phase of what it is that I do are just teaching people simple exercises to start contracting these muscles in ways they haven't in some time, to start invigorating and waking up these muscles that have been quiet, the ones they've been avoiding using. And when they start working on those and they identify these asymmetries in their body, these places they don't have stability or stamina or strength, they start getting those better, interesting things happen. Their mobility increases because they have more pieces, right? Different joints available they didn't have before to move. So they start moving more freely. They start having less tightness because where they're shifting extra work before, they now have less. So they're a bit more less tight, more smooth movement. And they just overall start feeling better, right? So Invigorate, this I section, just stands for exercises people are going to do that are more invigorating to wake up these quieter areas so that they can move better and more access to more tissue. And then Vitalize is more the traditional exercise pieces where we're talking about whatever, pressing, pushing, pulling, leg extensions, leg curls, the real output pieces, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we look at what you need in order to move very well, which is stability first, which just means muscles all firing healthy around joints. And then you need to be able to have muscles that are strong enough to do what you want them to do in the world. And then stamina, meaning that you have enough endurance to maintain the output needed to do those things. We got to build the stability first. And once things are really stable, we can layer strength on top of it. And then we can layer the stamina piece on top of it. The Invigorate phase is just a way of saying, let's do some different exercise to bring more stability so that you can work on your strength and your stamina through the vitalizing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those two things kind of happen together so people can both tackle their biggest weaknesses while continuing to build the rest of their body out in terms of their capacity.
Yeah.
And all of this is just in vain to get to those goals. If someone was really into aesthetics and they have some like joint issues they need to work on, that's where the Invigorate phase might come in, right? And oftentimes in the world of bodybuilding aesthetics, we'll do things like elbow extension and elbow curls, but people don't typically work on like supination and pronation, which is rotating in and out of the forearm. You might see some people do like some external rotation or internal rotation of the shoulder with cables or whatever, but you might just see them do it haphazardly as a warm-up, right? Some people, they'll do shrugs and they'll work their shoulder blades, but some people don't do like overhead protraction and work on that specifically, or they don't do dorsiflexion. People do calf raises till they're blue in the face, but they don't ever work the foot coming up towards the shin. We don't work on that piece too much, right?
Yeah.
And that foot coming up towards the shin piece needs to happen every time you take a bloody step, right? And so some people get knee pain just because they don't absorb force well from their foot and it carries up the system. I mean, there are people that I've worked on their elbows and their back pain gets better because things are just a part of the system. You work on the weakest parts of the system, everything ends up getting better, right? And then lastly, the evaluate phase, really, really simple. We're just going to go through evaluating how the progress is going, right? In the world of aesthetics is like, great, we've been doing this fat loss phase for a month. How much body fat have you lost? Have you lost any muscle? What's your body weight right now? How is your fatigue? Are you tolerating the exercise volume that you're doing really well? Are you not? We're evaluating based on all the metrics how you're doing. Are we not tired at all? Great, we can probably start pushing you in the gym a little bit more, maybe add some more sets and reps. Are you losing body fat at a great rate right now? Great, let's not change anything. Have you not lost as much body fat as you want to? Great, why is that happening? Are you still eating too much? Is the deficit not enough? Where are we at with that? But you have to evaluate those kind of things. And that's all the E is. It's just kind of an evaluation of like, where are we at right now? And I'll just go through that with my clients and see how's your range of motion, how's your mobility, how's your strength, how's your all that stuff that we're looking at. And then we create a new program for the next 6 to 12 weeks. We figure out what else we got to work on, and then we kind of rinse and repeat, right? Yeah. So that's kind of like the drive method in a nutshell, just like a system of collecting information so that we know where we are, we know where we want to be, trying to get a lay of the land. And then with the data that we have, we're just trying to plot the right course, execute on that course through exercise, and then just figure out, is it working or is it not working? Great. What's working, keep doing it. It's not working, reevaluate and progress forward. That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Great. And you said you've got you're in the middle of writing a book. Is it specifically on this?
So the book is very much for people who have pain and discomfort, and the exercise process they're going through right now or whatever they're doing to manage that isn't working for them. It's also for people that want to just be more stronger and mobile, but maybe aren't sure where to start. That's kind of who it's written towards. So if you're that person where you're starting at your 40s, you're starting to feel stuff that you don't like and nothing seems to work, and you want to bring more mobility and strength and just feel good with whatever you do, from 40 up into, the day you kick the bucket, so to speak. That's who the book is written for. If
Mhm.
you're looking for more aesthetic stuff, ignore my book at all costs. It's going to be a waste of money. But that's who it's written for. That's kind of my niche and who I work with, so to speak. So the short of the long is like the front end of the book is it's all knowledge based. So we talk a lot about like what is force and what is exercise. We talk about the biggest mistakes that people make, which is like the dosing of your joints, or like doing too much or too little. Talk a little about relying too much on passive therapies and why they don't do the same things as like an active thing like exercise does. And
Mm.
there's a bunch of information about like what do you have to start doing different. And then there's like a base methodology in the second half of the book, which is like, here's the actual drive method. Here's how
Mhm.
you put it into practice. And here is like a simple way to get started applying it for yourself in lieu of hiring an exercise professional. And disclaimer, I'm not medical. So anything you do from an exercise perspective, you always run it by a physician first, especially of pain and discomfort. I have to stress that on every podcast that I do.
Yeah, fair enough. So until the book is published, where's the best way that folks can find you, Glenn?
Yeah, people can go to glenowen.ca. I'm hoping to I don't know when this will be published. Right now it is August the 9th. I should have in the next 2 weeks, certainly by the end of August, the first 5 chapters available up online for people if they want to get like on the early waiting list for it. Otherwise, you can go to glenowen.ca. I've got a couple of videos about the drive method up there. Yeah, that's where people can find me right now. glenowen.ca, short of the long.
All right. I'll post that. All right. Well, I'll cut the recording, stick around for a second. And thanks again, Glenn, for hopping on.
Oh, this is dope, man. I would love to do this again. Anytime you want to do like a fitness one of these, this is great. Yeah, you're very articulate. I really enjoyed listening to the podcast. You asked great questions, and this was wonderful. Wonderful.
Awesome. I appreciate it too, man. I learned a few things, and that's exactly why I'm doing this. So thank you.
Love it.